NVRI.
Yeah.
First and foremost, did you have any interesting pickups this week?
God, I picked up Steve while I was in South Carolina for Minecraft. I got like regular Steve and then snap thing. I picked up regular Steve and diamond like armor Steve.
Nice.
And then broke Steve's leg in my girlfriend's car, and she's holding him hostage until I can find him. I'm very upset with that because I was gonna put him with all my like little figurines, and I did. Oh no! I actually got some lights that I can put under my.
See, I need
shelves.
to do that with this.
You really should.
I literally redid my case before you guys got here, and then half of them fell over.
And like, you would actually be great if you just got two, put them right up here. And
yeah.
It'll just go straight down because you have all glass. Like that'd be super dope. I got them at 5 and below, and then I had to go get freaking batteries for it. So
okay.
Yeah.
So it does require. Okay.
I think that's everything. I've been playing No Man's Sky again.
And you're enjoying it?
And it's so much fun. I've been playing it in VR too. So, like, I was laying on my couch.
Is it better in VR?
No, it doesn't really matter. Like, I go into VR if I'm, like, just downstairs by myself. And then if my roommates come downstairs, I'll just, like, take the VR off and then I can still play it.
Gotcha.
I don't really play the VR mode. So you can play it in VR and you can play with the VR motion controllers and everything. And I'll do that every once in a while. But I haven't done that in a while. But it's, like, I've only put, like, 10 hours in and I'm still in the tutorial. It's wild. But I've been in like 3 different galaxies, so...
At least you're doing shit. It's a tutorial, but you're doing shit, yeah.
Oh, Matt and I also got back on freaking...
Conan Exiles. There's this awesome Conan video game that it's like kind of free roaming. You can do whatever. And
yeah, it's a bitch.
But
we are god moding it, so they can suck.
Yeah, because we've had some issues, so we're just playing on a private server, and now we can just do whatever the hell we want.
Yeah, and I think I saw Joseph recently, so he might be hopping on too.
Sure.
Yeah,
more the merrier.
Cool. More the merrier, yeah.
But I guess for my pickups this week, I scored some pre-Force Friday stuff. I got this Kylo Ren here from The Rise of Skywalker.
I saw the pictures, and it looks pretty dope.
He has a little swinging feature. Hey. But yeah, they have like an embargo on like the new Star Wars toys before they come out and shit, and so it's just like... I saw it on the shelf, I'm like, well, I'm going to see if they'll let me buy it, and I go to check out, and it rings up, and I'm like, okay, I'm taking this with me.
I would say he's pretty detailed.
And he's pretty posable.
Yeah, he's super posable, and that's what I like in figures.
And then my other big pickup, this literally happened yesterday when Ashley and I went to Cumming, is I got Mysterio from the new Spider-Man movie.
I saw that. Like, I love that figure. It's super dope.
I just wish it came with a Jake Gyllenhaal head too. But and I have this like little shitty stand I have him sitting on, so it looks like it's floating. I want to kind of like maybe get some cotton balls and string it around and color it green so it's like a mist coming up behind it.
Nice. There's a Mysterio figure that came out last year with Marvel Legends.
The comic one, right?
Comic
yeah,
one,
comic
and
one.
It does come with some like green special effects.
That's the thing. He didn't come with anything.
Which I'm really surprised about.
Yeah, he came with alternate hands, but he didn't come with any glowy shit. I'm like, give me some Doctor Strange shit.
Yeah, no, that'd be super dope.
But I guess the one other thing I wanted to cover before we go to our wonderful guest is so we both saw Rambo,
The Last Blood.
So you've seen all of them, right? Actually,
I've seen all of
them. I have to grab a prop for us to have while we do this. Have you seen the Rambo movies?
Yeah.
This is the knife from Rambo 3.
Nice.
Where did you get this?
Yeah.
My friend got it for me at I think at a flea market years ago. Careful, it's sharp as fuck. But so I thought they ended it perfectly with Rambo 4 a couple years ago. I thought it was because my biggest thing, I watched all of them before I saw Last Blood.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice. That's good. I didn't do that.
I had the time, and they were just sitting around, and it was what I look forward to after my working days.
Nice.
Did you know the original ending of First Blood, he kills himself?
Yes.
Yeah, because in the novel he does. And
I didn't know it was a novel.
Yeah. The novel's fucked, but what was it? The whole thing Stallone said he didn't think that he thought that sent the wrong message to Vietnam vets, and that it's like, oh yeah, the only way for you to escape all this turmoil is to kill yourself.
Damn, that's fucked up.
Yeah, but so they let Rambo live, and of course the sequels followed suit. But he lost everything constantly in all those movies, whether it's the woman he was falling in love with in the second one, or Colonel Troutman or what have you. And it really, in the fourth one, I thought really ended it well because he just does this thing where he goes and saves his missionaries in Burma with the mercenaries. The whole thing is one of the missionaries tells him, like, you must still care about something, you must find something, and he takes her advice, and at the end, after being in Asia for God knows how many years, he goes back to his dad's farm in Arizona, and that's where it ends. I thought that was such a perfect little homecoming with it, and so when I heard they were doing a fifth one, I'm kind of like, why?
Yeah.
Like, you kind of...
You bookended it very nicely.
Yeah, and then I hear that the plot is essentially kind of like Logan or like the Unforgiven, where it's just like he's been living back in America for like 10 years. He's kind of taken in this Mexican woman and her granddaughter, and it's kind of his surrogate family. And I think it was the daughter gets kidnapped by some like cartel guys, and he's like, last ride of the outlaw, he's going to go save her at all costs. And I'm like, I don't think we need a fifth one, but okay, that's, give him like that, like, I'm going to go, the last ride of the outlaw sort of deal. I liked 2/3 of the movie.
Fuck that movie.
What, just in general?
No, I don't know. Like, I enjoyed being in the theater again because it's been a long time since I've been in the theater. Mm-hmm. I felt like they tried to put too much story in, which is...
I liked all the development with him.
With him was cool. With the development of the daughter, I didn't feel for her. When all that shit started happening, I was like, bitch, this is your fault. Like, that's really how I felt. And it's fucked up and it's very sad. And they took a very intense, real issue. Mm-hmm. And I get why they did that, because it was supposed to...
It's sex trafficking.
Sex trafficking. It's supposed to be very like, oh my gosh. And I'm just watching, I was like, cool. You shouldn't... He was literally talking to you and trying to, like, deter you from that. But you want to be like, I'm going to do my own thing.
It's very, very formulaic in that sense.
Yeah, and I think they could have the first half of the movie felt very rushed. Like, there's supposed to be a lot of, like
there's
human
at
moments.
least 20 minutes before that were cut out or
something
like that.
There's supposed to be a lot of human moments, but they felt very, kind of like, not cliche is the word, it's very just like, I've seen this before.
Just generic, yeah. What bothered me, spoilers for anybody, you might want to skip like 3 minutes ahead, but so he attempts to save the girl. It doesn't go so well the first time, but he goes back and is victorious in getting her back, but she's already been like drugged up and all this shit, and she dies in the truck on the way back to America. Yeah. And it's actually like, I love it and hate it at the same time, because I love it because like there's this moment where John Rambo like has this monologue where he basically says to her, it's just like, before you came along, I thought there was nothing but horrible death and dark things in this world, but then you came into my life and I saw that there was innocence and hope and all this stuff, and he said it gave me this thing that I've been lost for so many years that I thought was... And Stallone's performance is amazing. Mm-hmm. But then she dies, and it's just like... I just don't like it. It's like you brought... After having such a perfect ending where he finally gets to win... You take the thing away from it, and then it becomes a generic, like, revenge movie. Yeah. Granted, I love the whole Skyfall thing he does, where he basically, like, outfits his ranch house for these, like, cartel guys to come. He's just gonna fuck them up. He's got these tunnels he's built underneath. It's an awesome action sequence.
It's a very nice, it's a very wonderful, thought out... The whole third of the movie, like, you literally sit there...
The execution's fine.
Yes, the execution's fine. The entire third act is what you've been waiting for, but the build-up to get to that was very weak for me. Yeah. And I feel like the writing could have been done differently. Some of the editing... Not the editing is fine, but, like, you could have edited some stuff to, like... Like, the friend, I just want to, like, knock her over the head. Like...
That was very weak.
I feel like her whole entire purpose and character was for her friend to get caught. And it was very, like, just formulaic. In a way that
it's
wasn't
like, and after all these years, you think they would have really buffed out the kinks with this thing.
Right. And one of the problems, I guess, I was watching it with Luke, and I was like, they didn't need to give a lot of story. You could have been like, oh, hey, he has family
They do
now.
a little montage at the beginning that kind of sets
I
up...
don't remember.
They show, like, it's a bunch of photos on the wall of him with the girl as she's growing up.
Yeah, I do remember that. And then he's all, like, sad because she's not there. You're like, where's the girl? Like, where's she at? What's going on? And
well, the fact that he couldn't just figured out that she was clearly just blowing them off bothers me. But I think the thing, honestly, like, I would have taken the rest of the movie, even with her dying. This is, like, I'm actually... thinking about fixing the ending when the movie comes out. I know that's really arrogant of me to say, but it's just, I love the character so much, and especially after rewatching the movies, I don't feel like it did him justice, and that he didn't. The very, very end, he has a standoff, he defeats the cartel guys, it's really badass, but then, like, you think he would die at the end of that, like, like in Unforgiven or Logan or something like that, but no, he lives, and that really bothers me. I'm not saying, like, you need to murder the motherfucker, but it's just, like, if you're going to do all this, like, if you're not going to let him have peace in life, let him have peace in death, like he's with the people he loves. And he gives this really weird monologue as he climbs his way back into the rocking chair.
That was random as shit, too. That was random. I was
It was like
like,
some Hallmark bullshit.
yeah, I was like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, oh, everyone I knew was ghosts. And I was like, that's true, but like, do it better. Like,
This is what I'm gonna.
I'm okay that he's alive.
Well,
hopefully don't come back to do anything else. But
well, Stallone said that this is for sure his last one he's doing. That's
cool.
another reason I'm a little like kind of sour with it. But the way I'm going to fix the ending is he's been seriously injured. That's the one thing I love about Rambo. He always gets the shit kicked out of him. You know, like Schwarzenegger gets a little scratch here and there, but Rambo gets the shit kicked out of him in every single movie. But what so you think he's essentially going to die from all this shit. So he climbs back onto this rocking chair on this porch, and there's this beautiful sunset. It's like it's some John Ford shit.
Yeah.
What I wish they would have done. Have you guys seen Edge of Darkness with Mel Gibson?
Mm-hmm.
You've seen it?
I think so.
It's he's a Boston cop. It's a great movie. Well, I'm going to spoil it for you. It's a great movie that you should totally watch it. Spoilers aside. His daughter's murdered in the first, probably 20 minutes of the movie, and the whole thing is about him trying to figure out what happens. So he figures out what happens, he goes and defeats the bad guy, there's this whole shootout deal or I can't remember the details exactly, but he's been shot up, and the last bit is he's in the hospital, and the way they shoot it's really cool, because they've got a shot of him, on the table, and all the doctors are working on. You hear the life, or the heart monitor go dead. Mm-hmm. But what's cool is the camera pans out of the room, and he walks out of the room. Like totally normal, no wounds, no anything. He looks completely normal and healthy. And the camera follows him, and it turns. And you see he passes by the nurse's station, and his daughter, who died at the beginning, is there waiting for him. And it's not like this big, cheesy hug moment. It's just this really sweet moment. It's like, oh, I'm waiting for Dad to finish his doctor's appointment. Yeah. And they just walk out of the hospital together. And, of course, the doors, when they open, there's this big bright light. So, it's them going to heaven. Mm-hmm. I thought that was beautiful. I think that's the best way to do something like that. Yeah. What I would have done is a version of that with this, where when he climbs up in the rocking chair and he's staring out into the sunset, I would have had, a shot from behind. I think they have one in the movie, but I would have had a shot from behind where you see kind of out of focus, kind of looking down on him. You see a hand come over the rocking chair. He looks up, it's his daughter, and she's just got this big warm smile on her face. And then he notices his wounds are gone, and they just look at each other and smile, and then they both watch the sunset and it fades. Just let him be at peace with her. That's just what I would have done.
If I were to fix the entire movie, I would have the entire first half of the movie would just be relational stuff. Yeah. You get to watch them have a relationship together. There's no impending, oh my God, something's going to happen to her. You just want to, just a slice of life type thing, where it's you get to actually feel with these characters, so that when she does die or gets taken away, you're like, oh shit, go kill them. Because one of the things I love about action movies is whenever they get the final guy, it's this awesome, generally it's an epic type kill. Yeah. I did love the way he killed him. I get what he said. I get why he did it that way. But I didn't feel it was enough payoff.
I thought it was almost too much.
Really?
Yeah, well...
It wasn't enough payoff because there wasn't the relationship. Because I didn't care if the girl died. She was being a stupid hoe. Don't be a stupid hoe, and I'm going to have to kill everybody. Yeah. That's basically me. Yeah, I got you. If I didn't feel like she was a dumb hoe, I would have been damn, kill that dude. But I'm just kind of
I was more forgiving with it because I understand that she's just a young teenager, and also from
teenagers
hold
on,
let me make my point. So, a little bit of personal stuff for our listeners. My father passed away when I was 7, and unfortunately, shortly after he passed away, the one uncle I had on my father's side of the family completely cut contact with us. We don't know why. We have a strong feeling it was his bitch of a wife or whatever. I'm not going to go into redneck family bullshit drama. But long story short, I always had this longing of reconnecting with that. Not just not so much to reconnect with them, but just to learn more about who my father was as a person. And long story short, there was this sort of reconnection. It was not very good. And I found out that my uncle had died 2 years prior, and I found out through a Facebook post. Oh, wow. And I wasn't even friends with the relatives. But point is, I get where she's coming from in the sense that you want those questions answered. You want you want to learn about that side of you. Mm. And I thought the scene where she actually confronts her real father was fucked.
I thought that was really
great.
Good.
It was great, but it was
really good
fucked.
Scene. Yeah, I thought it was fucked, but I thought that was probably the peak performance within her storyline.
Yes.
After that, I was like, just go home.
Yeah. Well, she should have just gone straight home.
Gone home.
But, it's just... I get it, and I'm more forgiving with that from a personal standpoint. But I feel like the movie honestly it felt rushed.
Yeah, it's only like an hour and 20 minutes, hour 30 minutes.
Well,
I think.
all the Rambo movies are like an hour and a half, with the exception of the third one is an hour 45.
As a kid, I thought they were like a lot longer.
They feel a lot of shit happens, but yeah.
But I feel like not a lot of shit happened in this one.
It was slow.
It was slow, but nothing happened really.
Yeah.
I feel like I was watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again. No, I'm just kidding. Don't cry in front of Mexicans.
Well, I guess with that, I mean, it's like, check it out, form your own opinion. I think Stallone's performance is amazing. All the actors are great.
Yes, every time you hear me on this podcast, I'm going to say, fuck a movie. Like, go see it. Like, if you're interested in it, go see it. I will never deter. I hate critics, so don't listen to me. I don't know shit. But, like, that's just what I thought.
But I guess with that, we should not ignore the wonderful gentleman in our presence right now.
No one's ignoring. It's all good.
But, I guess, just to give a brief intro, so about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, when I moved up here, over 2 years ago since I moved up here, I'm an artist, and so I, was in dire need of a good place with good art supplies and people who knew what the fuck they were talking about with said art supplies. So I moseyed my way down to Binder's Art and Frame in Buckhead, and I strike up a conversation with this gentleman about
I've been called many things, but never that.
But the conversation was about nothing else than Godzilla, and here I was having we were strangers up until this point, but we had probably a good 15-20 minute conversation about Godzilla.
Yeah,
and that kind of started the beginnings of a friendship that included me working there, and has since afterwards. And
absolutely,
I'd just like to introduce Eric Peterson, who is a wonderful, talented, hilarious artist in his own right, and as well as just one of the funniest human beings I've ever met. Eric, welcome to Common Sense.
Why, thank you very much.
Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
Captain on deck.
Captain on deck. Oh my! Since we're about to have a phenomenal episode,
I think that we are about to have a Shatner off. What'd you say, sir?
A shat off?
A shat off, yes.
Shat off sounds...
Why, Captain, I believe this is your pile. Spock, just walk around it for God's sake.
Stop being a bogan.
This is, and to give viewers a little deeper cut with this, part of me and Eric's, my favorite shifts were when we worked together, mainly because we would be shouting across the store impressions at each other that ranged from Star Trek.
Jennifer was always saying that, too.
Yes, our manager, dear friend as well. But, I just remember it ranged from Captain Kirk and Spock and...
Don't forget Paul Lynde.
How can I forget Paul Lynde? But yeah, Paul Lynde, Charlton Heston. Sweet Jesus. That was that thing that broke the ice.
Did you encourage him with that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Here's the thing, though. It's like as great as he does that, and everybody thinks it's obviously phenomenal, the Peter Griffin is...
What the hell are you talking about?
Oh, you've never done a Peter Griffin?
I've never done Peter. You son of a bitch. You've never asked me.
See, that's the harder one to do.
Yeah.
And it's like the fact that that's so dead on.
Yeah. I appreciate that because I always thought that was the one I was just off on.
This is the very first time I've heard of Peter Griffin.
That's the,
What the hell are you talking about, fat man? I'm just saying, why the fuck is there a baby sitting in my house talking? I'm like a madman. No, I'm not as good with improv as you are. You were just particularly when we got into the Planet of the Apes shit. As you can still see, I kept many of the little paraphernalia from those instances. But when we got into Planet of the Apes, it was Dr. Zaius and Charlton Heston. It's just like, if this is the best they've got, we'll be running this place in 6 weeks.
I forget how we even got off on a Planet of the Apes.
I think
it was such an unusual reference.
Well, you mentioned it, or one of us mentioned it, having recently saw it on TV or something, and then I geeked out because it's my favorite. Other than I love the new three. The new three are wonderful, but I love the first one.
Jaws. It had to have been through some kind of Jaws route, right? Because when you told me how much you connected with that film on so many different levels, and I hate to make this about an ageism thing, but it's a lot of what your interests are that are from my generation. I find someone your age not only just being aware of these things, but a big fan of it as well. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you were so into Jaws was unusual to me for someone
Sure.
your age. I mean, at most, someone your age might have heard of it, never mind seen it.
Well,
so somehow or other, that probably moved off into, oh, well, if you liked that, here's some other sort of iconic films from, different. Have you seen the original Planet of the Apes? So probably.
I remember what it was.
Like that.
It was Jaws. We were talking about because you were asking about like what films like the curriculum when I was in Full Sail was was really pushing, because you had asked if it was Citizen Kane, which we talked about Citizen Kane, but we didn't watch it. What we didn't even watch Jaws, but the one all my teachers circled back to constantly was how great Jaws was, and of course it was 2012, and they just put out the Jaws restoration Blu-ray. It's like, it looks pristine and beautiful, so I got that, rewatched the movie. I love the movie. I read the book when I was in 8th grade.
Yeah.
And I saw the movie too. But in terms of filmmaking, what Spielberg did with that movie is amazing. And the fact that he did it at like 27 is remarkable to me. But yeah, it was that. It was Planet of the Apes. It was The General with Buster Keaton. It was. We did talk about Casablanca. And I know that's kind of the one stereotypical one there, but it's earned. It's really good. I'm surprised we didn't talk about as much as the Maltese Falcon, which I love. But yeah, it was weird how the film curriculum, I guess, was different than you would expect. You think it would just be them basically sucking Citizen Kane's dick for 2 years, but
Well, it's fascinating.
It's a good film, but
I finally, at Binders one day, I ran into someone who was a film professor.
No way.
I can't remember where she said that she taught, but I said, okay, I have a question for you. I said, as a film professor, Citizen Kane, where do teachers in film school, or maybe just from where your standpoint is, how do you feel about sort of classic films, especially something like Citizen Kane, where it's always the greatest film that's ever been made? Now, ages ago, we hadn't gone through everything that the film industry has already gone to at this particular point.
Mm-hmm.
There's particular periods of time that are just carved out as being very descriptive of their time, like the 70s. I mean, come on, The French Connection, Dirty Harry. I mean, these were Dog Day Afternoon, The Godfather. These were like definitive.
Star Wars.
Yeah, radically different subject matter, the whole 9 yards. There was a grit to a lot of that. Same thing with classic Hollywood. John Ford's been coming up today, as we've been talking about. But I was fascinated because I wanted to know where a film professor stands and what are your film. There's so much available. What are your students going to get into? Not every young kid that's in your first year of school, they're come on, let's get off the Citizen Kane business. You know what I mean?
Let's talk about other stuff.
It's not like it's the only thing. So what is it that you leave out?
Mm-hmm.
And she said something really fascinating to me, that they kind of move along the lines, or at least her method was, of what they're capable of handling, what their interest level is.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
obviously you're going to have a class where if they're nodding off because you're analyzing Bergman's Through the Glass Darkly and you're hearing snoring, or you can talk about Road Warrior. And everybody's all excited.
I love Road Warrior.
And everybody's all excited. So what is it that you talk about? What is it that you leave out? It's like there's just so much now. I mean, if you take a lot of the classic directors like Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, particularly if you get a lot of guys that were in film school during the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
because these guys were going to school. What was before them? This was the 60s. You had 30 years or so since silent film was now at talkies, as they called it. There wasn't a whole lot. I remember seeing an interview with Woody Allen one time, and they're like, well, it's fascinating how I'm seeing, Fellini and Antonioni influences in all your films. And, they were, and Woody was right on it with saying, it's not like that I was more clever than anybody else. He says, you got to remember, that's what was available to me at the time, and it was inspiring. If I was a filmmaker now, I would probably like those guys, but I would like a whole lot of other things. Those were just the guys that I was into because that's what was available at the time.
Right. It's like George Lucas with Kurosawa.
Absolutely. And it's not like all of a sudden, the light goes off. Oh, I'm so clever. I've discovered Fellini and no one else knows who he is. That's what was there. Mm-hmm. The same thing with, those classic directors that were in school in the 60s. They had all of these, the people that they were into. But, 1966 or 68 or whenever they were in school, there was not a whole huge era of film industry like it is now. Look at all that's been packed in since the 60s. Mm-hmm. So if you're a film professor, what do? Shawshank Redemption or The Ten Commandments? Mm-hmm. Rambo or The Great Escape?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, and you're going to have someone that's like, oh God, the Maltese Falcon. There's going to be someone that's going to be like that. Mm-hmm. Most film people that I know, it's a yawn fest when it comes to John Cassavetes, even though I'm big into him because his stuff just reeks of so anti-film industry. And that's why he was really, really important for a lot of those directors because, they were watching people like Howard Hawks and John Ford, but at the same time, they were noticing these sort of radical new left that were done with the old Hollywood, and Cassavetes was one of those guys. Here was a guy that acted, he wrote, he directed, but it was totally not like Hollywood films. Mm-hmm. But you have people meaning, because people would look at his stuff and say, Jesus Christ, can't he light that hallway better than that? He's supposed to be, this is John Cassavetes, that's all. But see, you're not, the thing is that he wants you to be aware of film.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when you hear someone playing a violin, you hear the overtones of the fingers on the strings. That's not a nuisance. That's the nature of the beast. That's what that is.
Yeah, but it's not a keyboard,
It's the same thing. And that's what I love about Andy Warhol's earlier films before he hooked up with Paul Morrissey and made them more cinematic, where he would, especially the stuff he did with Edie Sedgwick, Kitchen, or his Eiffel Tower sequences. His whole concept was, what are we going to do today? Hey, let's make some bad films. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not that he meant bad in the sense that so people would watch it and say, I get it, aren't these terrible? He wanted you to be aware that you were watching film. So all of a sudden you're watching a sequence and it's muffled and someone bangs into a chair and you can see the boom mic in here. Exactly. Not just human, but he wants you to be aware of the mechanics of film. When you get rid of the mechanics of film and you're trying so hard to focus on real life, sometimes you forget you're watching a film. Cassavetes' films had that same kind of thing. You almost felt uncomfortable when you saw a dark hallway of some sort of dingy apartment building and this husband and wife screaming and yelling at each other, and you're hearing the echo of this hallway. You can practically smell the mold in the carpet, and you're feeling like you're eavesdropping, like you shouldn't be standing there watching this. Mm-hmm. So long story short, what do you do with all this information when you're in school? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you leave out? Do you leave it up for kids to say what they're interested in? If they say what they're interested in, they might say, I'm not interested in that old silent crap. What do I want to watch a Keystone Cops film? But that stuff is important. Mm-hmm. It's part of your whole history of something. Mm-hmm.
It's like you got to pick and choose, but you got to pick and choose the right stuff and not necessarily just the standard.
Like when I was in art school, I have a lot of praise for my teachers when I was in art school because I really felt in so many ways there was no stone unturned. And because they were a natural at what they did, I feel that nothing got left out. No one was sitting there with a checkbook saying, okay, pointillism, check, French Impressionism, check, realism, check, going down the whole line of things. It wasn't a textbook, Yeah, and somehow the ebb and flow of it, we got a good flavor of a good retrospective, not just in art history, but in terms of what we were looking at. Yeah, we were studying illustration and advertising where I went. But at the same time, our fine art classes in art history, we had to go to museums and we had to write on people and say, go to the museum, find someone that you like, whether it's a painting or a sculpture or it's a vase, and I want you to tell me what you see there. If you hate it, tell me why you hate it. There is no right or wrong to this assignment other than you not doing it.
Yeah.
It was like a completion grade, but they want your effort with it.
Absolutely. Too, yeah. So you talk about, I don't understand what he's doing here, with form. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. This color palette doesn't make any sense. Why is everything so immaculately shaded, but there's this thick outline around everything? It doesn't make any sense to me. Mm-hmm. He would say, tell me all that. Put that in your paper. So, in a sense, you ended up one way or another finding things. Yeah. Whether someone showed you something or you found it on your own.
In your personal experience, like both as an artist and as someone who loves films and everything, I mean, we were talking about like Blockbuster and everything the other day. What has been more interesting to you in the sense that somebody has referred something or something you've discovered?
Both. Somebody blew my mind recently by telling me about a thing I had absolutely no idea about called Carl Jung's Red Book.
Never heard
which
of it.
Was all of these psychedelic, amazing drawings and paintings, or I should say all paintings. Mm-hmm. They look like a cross between like Tibetan deities and Aztec imagery. Mm-hmm. And the person that told me about this said that his family didn't want any of this stuff published ever, so it sat under wraps for a long time until it finally came forth and was published, I don't know how many years ago. But his family didn't want that getting out because they thought he was a crackpot. And that these drawings, it's like, what is he? Like he's taking all this shit and doing all these weird drawings.
Yeah.
He might have been doing mushrooms or something like that.
Yeah. But still, like...
I never heard of that. I was so excited about it, so I started looking up on the internet and looking at the illustrations that he had done for it.
Mm-hmm. He was a philosopher, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know the name.
Psychologist, philosopher. The two spheres of psychology, Freud and Jung. Mm. Man and his symbols, Carl Jung. Yeah. Founding one of the founding fathers of modern psychology.
I gotta poke at you and go monkey dance a little bit. Could we see some of your artwork?
Yeah. Now, what I have is nothing fancy, but that's where I'm at now. Because, I've done stuff for presentations, I've done stuff for publications, I've done stuff for this and that, and as we've talked before, at the risk of it being redundant, as well worn as a term it is, I really have come full circle in terms of this, because everything I do now is very simplified. Simplified. I've already gone the whole 9 yards of blowing people's minds with a million details, and I can see the reflection in his eyeball. I'm not interested in that anymore. I like going purely from my subconscious and just really improvising with things. And a lot of what I do now is just like I did when I was a kid. I draw on scraps. Most of my life since high school, I worked in a sketchbook. I have scraps of computer paper now. And this is what I work on. All this stuff.
Are you still using markers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is what I do now. And most of it is all geared towards so I can take pictures with my phone and stick it on the Instagram and Facebook. But it's all loose. It's all unlabored. A couple of years ago, I remember looking at a piece of finished work that I had done, and I was comparing it to this quick 30-second sketch that I had in my pocket that was all folded up. And I said, something's getting lost in translation here, because why am I liking the 30-second drawing better than the controlled, technical one that I pulled off my illustrator's chops, so to speak. Okay, I know what's getting lost in translation. The improvisation's gone. Yeah, every now and then you'll find a blank one in there. I just grabbed a stack. I just grabbed the top off the stack before I left.
If you don't follow Eric on Instagram, it's Eric Peterson, right? Like, it's not what I love is the simplicity, like you were talking about, but I also just love that you are unapologetic with your humor, and it's just like we had a wonderful conversation at Binders one time about like people who thought they were above fart jokes. I think if somebody doesn't laugh at a fart joke, there's something wrong with them.
I also think fart jokes are meant to be here to agitate the people who are agitated about fart jokes. So it's kind of like it's a hell of your own making, folks.
Yeah.
As long as you're uptight, there's going to be someone farting next to you.
One thing I wanted to ask you about was, and this is something we've talked about multiple times, but for Jeremiah and our viewers' sake, one of the first things you told me when we first really started getting into how we go about art is you told me that there was a 10-year period where you did not do any art whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Like, can you take us through that?
Yeah, I got really, I mean, every kid draws. I mean, so when, you got an artist that's like, well, I always liked drawing since I was a kid. Yeah. All right, we all did that. There's no big, that, you're over in your own category. But there comes a part where in every person's childhood where there's a turn that happens, whether it's your own internal guidance or it's influences from what's going on in your life or whatnot. It either fades away and you don't do it anymore or it increases. And I drew no differently than any other kid. Stuff that I did as a small child did not show anything exceptional compared to anybody else's. Looked just like any other second graders. But by the time I hit 9, I was in the 5th grade, and I can remember very clearly there was a recess break that we had during the day. But it must have been either raining or cold weather or something, because usually when it was like that, we had recess indoors. Mm-hmm. So kids would talk and mill around or whatever. I gravitated towards this one kid in my class that I didn't know who was totally engrossed in drawing. Mm-hmm. And I sat with him and I said to myself, I want to do that too. So I whipped out a piece of paper and a pencil. I can remember clearly, I don't know why. Again, this goes back to the improving more that I'm trying to do now. And I drew some weird bald guy with his face stuffed full of lit cigarettes. I don't know where that came from, but that's what I did. And it ignited there. So fast forward to a lot of years of just drawing on my own, practicing, copying stuff out of newspapers, etc., and taking art classes here and there when I was a teenager and whatnot. Art school, and then doing it professionally for a while after that as a freelancer, etc., a stint in advertising, the whole 9 yards. By the time I hit 30, I felt like I hit a wall. Left advertising and commercial work. Spiritually drained from it. I didn't really enjoy any of it.
Was it just work at that point?
It had always been that way.
Okay.
Very rarely did I enjoy the commercial work because it just wasn't. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't interesting. Yeah, in a nutshell, that's exactly it. So I didn't consciously do it. It just sort of faded out. I started to focus on music, doing percussion, getting along and introducing myself and meeting lots of other musicians. Then gradually music kind of took over and then art started to fade away. So there was never any conscious thing where I got up one day and said, I'm not going to do it anymore. It gradually faded on its own. But the incentive was, I remember the last drawing that I had done, I tried doing something. I said, my heart's just not in this anymore. And then about 10 years went by. I'd gone through a whole bunch of personal stuff in my life, and then I felt that I needed this. And it all coincided with starting up again by going and getting the art supplies, but also going into binders.
Right, I remember.
So
you just moved to Atlanta, or you've been in
No,
Atlanta?
I've been here for a long while, but I was doing music for all that time, and I had gone through yet again another sort of crisis in my life. And I had come into binders to apply for a job. I figured, I don't do art anymore, but I still know all this shit. Yeah, I did that. There's a few of those that.
You did this one today, didn't you?
This morning.
Oh wow, that's neat.
I get my best ideas a lot of the time right when I get up in the morning as
Really?
I'm heading to my coffee thing, because, again, I can't emphasize it enough to try to turn off the mechanics of the mind. And it's almost like everything that's in sleep world or dream world is still swarming around your head when you get up.
Right.
I mean, I might be physically walking towards the coffee pot, but I'm out of it. I'm groggy.
Yeah.
And I get my best ideas in that moment from getting out of bed and walking over to the coffee pot. Like, I thought of the idea of a corpse in a pile of leaves reaching for the rake.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, I don't know.
I'm going to include these in our Instagram posts, and obviously a link to Eric so you can see them. But yeah, I love it because it's like, especially because one thing we've talked about also, just when we were working together, was just like classic horror films and like, you know, Frankenstein movie and everything. Absolutely. I love seeing your interpretation of all that.
Yeah.
So what has been, out of the artwork that you've done, what has been the art that you've done that stood out the most, or that you...
What I did this morning.
Nice.
Anything I did a week ago, 10 years ago, it amuses me. Mm-hmm. I like seeing the sort of ebb and flow of how my brain works. Mm-hmm. But I like what I've just done.
Nice. Sorry, I love this one.
Yeah, see, like Zardoz. I mean, of course, you know, Zardoz is just so part of my subconscious that it's like I had to do it at some point.
It's funny because I've never actually seen the film. But
like, you've got to see Zardoz.
What's funny is, so I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Samuel Arbo. He, a number of years ago when we were in high school for Christmas, he got me, like, as a gag gift, he got me this book that's like a collection of like photos of Sean Connery through all the films he's been in. And I came across literally the exact photo that this is like pulling from. Yeah. And I'm just like, what the fuck is this?
But see, here's the thing. Again, how all this stuff ties together. Because whenever anybody says to me, "What are your influences?" We would be here for years if I were to say, because, and I'm sure everybody, you know, you guys have your influences, and so has theirs. We all have the things that are near and dear to our hearts. But it's also the way we experience these things is what makes them really magical. Right. You said earlier about discovering it on your own or someone introducing it to you. Both have their own value and their own level of excitement, and that's what makes them reflect and complement one another. But Zardoz, I can remember like it was yesterday. I was probably about 15 years old, and this was back during the days where I think HBO was around, but that was about it, with maybe a couple of other stations. And not everybody had cable, even at that point.
Was it still like dishes and shit? Or like the bunny ears?
I think it was still the bunny ears, if I'm not mistaken. And so you would have these floods of strange movies on a Sunday or a Saturday afternoon. Now, again, so if I was about 15, that would have made it the late 70s, 79 or whatever. Now, again, there's not a lot to cull from for a local TV station to put on. They used to call them Saturday matinee movies or whatever, Sunday matinee movies. They could be anything from the horror movie Them with the giant ants, or it could be Diary of a Married Housewife, or Doctors and Wives, or Zardoz. And one day I was bored out of my fucking mind, and I was clicking around on the channels, and all of a sudden I just see Sean Connery with long hair and a handlebar mustache inside of this balloon pushed up against it. And I was just looked at that and I said, what the fuck? And that's how I like to experience things that are absurd.
Like you tumble into it.
And you tumble into it. It's literally like you walked into a room where the most crazy things were going on that has no reference to the rest of the house. Yeah. Now these are key points of things that I enjoy exploring on a daily basis, either through creativity or conversations with other people, is that things of absurd and surrealism I love out of context. So there's a lot of times, if you just flip through the channels and you catch something with no reference point, if you saw the reference point, it probably wouldn't have seemed as weird. Mm-hmm. But without that reference point, you caught mid-click on a channel clicker. Yeah. Mid-click, you caught something weird happening that you had no context for.
Right. And that grabs your attention.
And that's the impression that I want to go after. Mm. I'm not interested, like if somebody I get a lot of mail from people online with a lot of these things. And I have a lot of people that get it. I have a lot of people that don't. I have a lot of people that think it's funny. I also get haters. And there's
you love your haters.
I love my haters. I love my haters. One of my favorite underground cartoonists, Skip Williamson, who passed away a couple of years ago, he is a founding father of your classic underground comics from the 60s. Same group of guys on various coasts, but the same group of guys that Robert Crumb and Gilbert Sheldon and people like that were affiliated with. Anyway, I got out of my car one day at Binders and I'm heading into work, and all of a sudden I see this guy and a woman about maybe 5 cars away getting out of a car and heading into Binders. And I said, Jesus Christ, that looks like Skip Williamson. And then I thought, well, he lives in Vermont. What the hell would he be doing here? And then I saw him turn slightly, and I saw a shoulder tattoo that he had done of one of his favorite, his most famous cartoon characters. And then that's when I knew that it was him. So I passed him on the stairs, and as I went by and I said, I love your work, Skip, I'm a big fan. And without missing a beat, he goes, oh, you're the one. And I fucking loved it. Then he came up to my register after he bought some art supplies, and we talked for a little bit. And before he left, he says, let's exchange numbers, he said.
No way.
Yeah, he said, because there was a big flood up in Vermont at that time, and it took his studio. He lost a lot of work and a whole bunch of other stuff. He had lived about 20 years ago in Atlanta for a short period of time.
No way.
But he didn't like the scene here and then ended up going up to Vermont. So long story short, we swapped phone numbers. He says, let's have lunch. All right, so I think I got a text message from him or something a day or two later. Let's have lunch. Okay, so we meet at, what do you like? He goes, you like Thai food? Oh, absolutely, I'm straight on board. So we go and have Thai food. And for me, it's like, you get a chance to sit with the Godfather.
Mm-hmm. Right,
you know?
right.
All I needed was for him to say, I want you to go see the Talia family. I want you to go find out about what's going on with this Salazzo business. It was practically like that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear his stories. He told me all these whacked out stories of taking acid with the Jefferson airplane and sitting on a balcony in a hotel room looking off at this golf course melting.
Oh my God.
But anyway, long story short, I remember him telling me this story that stuck with me. And I remember catching an interview with him on some old cable channel, and he relayed the same story to the host of this thing. Said it was probably about in the 5th grade, maybe. He says, in one of my classes, I was doing a drawing of Mickey Mouse. And he says, my teacher absolutely erupted into a fit of rage and exploded. And in his mind, he thought to himself, if this could make somebody that angry, I want to do this the rest of my life.
That's funny.
So every time someone sends me an email that says, you fucking suck.
Yeah. I'm doing my job right.
I want to do this for the rest of my life.
I'm doing my job right.
But, okay. Now we can break it down and say, well, he was drawing in class and the teacher was pissed because he wasn't paying attention, yada, yada, yada. However we want to slice it into overanalyzing it. The bottom line is that the gist of it is still the same. Mm-hmm. If this could make somebody that fucking angry, I want to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I remember you told me you told me a version of this before, but what was funny was you kind of added to like the whole like, if this is what I get for like just doing this for shits and giggles, imagine what it's gonna be like when I try.
Yeah.
And that I that really resonated with me, because it's just like,
when you're doing it because you enjoy it, it just rolls naturally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then if you really want to emphasize on, but see, I've already been on that side before for a lot of years. See, that's what art school is. That's what, when you do it professionally, what you do with your films, what anybody does with that, and it's fascinating because I'm in about a month I'm turning 55. And I love being in my 50s. It's like my whole connection to lots of things is radically different now than it was when I was in my 20s. And at the risk of making this sound overly philosophical...
Please, we love getting heady on this.
It's literally like you're whittling a stick or something, or you're working with clay. The whole concept of working with clay is you're revealing something by taking shit away. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Same with whittling.
Kind of like with there's a quote, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, I think it's Michelangelo was talking about when he was sculpting David. Yeah,
he said he released it from the block of granite.
Like he saw it in there before. That's like.
I mean, I don't know that I see in my own granite, but
you're pulling it out in a way.
Less than that. I did more pulling out of things when I was in my 20s.
Oh my!
Some kind of prison code.
I'm sorry. I had to.
No, it's good. No, we got to have that stuff in there. I'm on my best behavior.
Well, what was I actually flipping through your artwork here? One thing I've noticed. This is you and your wife, right?
Yeah.
I love how you include her in your artwork because I include Ashley in some form or fashion. She materializes in something I do, like that picture up there. That's just like I'm taking her, bringing her into my brain, and then like that's how it comes out. And it's just I love that she's like a very present part. What does she think of all this?
She loves it.
Nice.
And the thing is that if I'm gonna think in terms of like conceptually, but I don't linger too long there because, like I say, I like to bypass a lot of that. Mm-hmm. But you got to have some of that in there to be sort of tying certain things together. And what I really love about including either imagery of that's sort of directly of my wife, such as this one, or a hint of personality that might show up somewhere, is opposites. Mm. Because I can't think of a better counterpart, in life as well as in here. It's like, my wife is everything that I'm not. I'm crude and raunchy. My wife is respectful and sweet. So, in order to emphasize that, that's what I have in here. Mm-hmm. Someone who's patient, someone who's inquiring, you know what I mean? Someone who is thoughtful. Meanwhile, here's me, mouth open, drooling and sleeping, and I can't stay awake half the time.
If I may ask, how'd you guys meet?
We met online.
No way, really?
Yeah, that as in life, when I find her incorporating into my work, that it's the counterpoint. You know what I mean? It's like
it's always warm though. That's what I love about it.
Well, yeah. I mean, she's a very warm person. You know what I mean? But it works because the counterpoint of just being, I can emphasize my crudity even more because people see this lovely person. Mm-hmm. So I'm even more crude because of her presence in here. Mm-hmm. And then it's that opposite.
She kind of sets
He's a guy who he spilled something on his shirt, or he's leaning to one side and farting. You know what I mean?
One thing I want to mention, because I've always been shy about my opinions about things, just because political, otherwise, what have you. It's just because I'm always afraid of like taking a firm stand on. And then I'm working with this man who has who's unapologetically.
No boundaries.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say what I think. I'm gonna draw what I think. It was just, honestly, Eric, it gave me a huge avenue. It gave me a lot of like confidence to be comfortable with myself and the things that I draw. Mm-hmm. And
well, in all trueness, though, and I say this. My stuff really is kind of mild, what I do visually. I'm no Robert Crumb or an S. Clay Wilson. Those guys, it spilled out
Take
on the
notes,
floor.
Everyone.
Those guys spilled it out on the floor. That was the id run wild. I'm more fascinated with innuendo.
Mm-hmm. That's what I noticed.
Like kind of dancing towards it rather than
dancing towards it. Yeah. It's not because you don't want to call it or say it what it is. Part of me is like, why bother? Because you're one in another million that it's just sort of throwing it all on the floor. Mm-hmm. We don't need to go there again. As far as I don't want something to be misinterpreted as that I'm going for shock value, because I'm long over that. I'm not 15 anymore, and I used to like to be. I took pride in being a shock artist when I was younger. I'm just not interested in that. It's a quick sugar rush, and then that's that. What's happening here is that I love innuendo more. Now, there's some stuff, someone say, well, how could you say this is innuendo? You drew Princess Leia as a transgender, and it was in full erection. Right there. That's pretty much out there. But I don't see that as being explicit.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas Robert Crumb, you see full ejaculation going everywhere. And it's everywhere.
It's like he takes it the next step where you're just like, I'm gonna get you.
Yeah, and that's
I'm gonna get you there, but you're gonna have to do some work yourself.
Yeah, and that's what. Yeah, and because I find suggesting it a little more makes it worse. So it's like
your imagination comes.
Yeah,
so it's like I draw the Teletubbies all with hard-on, and then I leave it up to someone else to put it all together. Like, why are they all hard?
Yeah.
And this is something, I don't know, everybody is of different mindsets. You know, you've got logical people, and then you've got people that like to work a different, they like to create in a different way.
Yeah.
And I'm not of the mindset where I have to have it all spelled out for me. One of my biggest influences is Monty Python.
I can see that. Oh my God, I can see that.
The thing that inspires me the most about the Pythons is that when I used to see their stuff on TV as a teenager, and the biggest lesson that they taught me is that nothing has to make sense and nothing has to relate to one another.
Mm-hmm.
The surest thing that gets me aggravated is I want to know who he is. I want to know where he came from. I want to know what his favorite...
The Joker's conversation from earlier.
Yeah, you don't need to know all of that, but some people need to know all that. They like context. They like where he comes from because, you know, they like some sort of a foundation that makes sense that's the springboard for this. But see, I'm interested in not knowing why there's a poet under the stairs. Or bicycle repairman walks around in a Superman outfit fixing bicycles. The Pythons never explained any of that.
Mm-hmm. They just did it.
They just did it. I also love the fact that the other big influence was the fact that they came in the middle of something. It was like you crashed a party and heard part of a conversation with the Python stuff, which is something I think the films kind of lose a little bit of that. I'm not knocking the films, but...
It's not as raw as the TV show.
The TV show I like for its rawness that, you know, and now for something completely different, and some guy would come in with a badger on his head, making weird noises, and then trip and fall, and then he falls into a scene where there's a restaurant. You know, it's like, so you ordered the grapefruit today, sir, huh? Mm-hmm. Well, it's like, what the hell does that mean? So I can see some stodgy, creative writing type guy saying, "You've never resolved anything here. This doesn't work."
That's not the point.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sketches on the TV show is. It's just like, I think they kind of foreshadowed Family Guy in the whole cutaway gags that Family Guy does.
Yeah.
Because there's a bit where, I can't remember who is exactly doing it, but I think it's John Cleese is just standing there. And there's another dude with two fish dancing back and forth, smacking him in the face, walking back and forth. And they've got this like, kind of like Three Stooges music behind it. And it's just so damn funny to me because it's just like...
That's the one reference I always like to make. Because there's no dialogue, there's no reference point, there's no
It's just absurdity.
Absurdity is exactly it.
There's I love the dead parrot one. That's a classic. But like the other one thing I loved about all their episodes is they would have like, I feel like they would have some sort of reoccurring gag. It would, of course, there would never necessarily be a payoff for it, but there would just be some reoccurring thing. Like there's one where it's like something would happen, somebody would get shot out of a cannon, you hear something, and then it cut to a guy in like a classroom, and there's a like a set of pigs drawn on the chalkboard, and he just goes and crosses one out, and they cut back to this guy like 4 times, and he crosses a new one off each time. It's like, I mean, honestly, like, what the fuck? My mom's not gonna be happy about this particular part, but like when I was in college, my roommate and I got blazed one day, and we were watching like the Flying Circus, and that was one of the things that, like, we caught that episode where it was that, and we just kept looking at each other, and every time our laughter grew farther and farther. I mean, obviously we were blazed, but we're sitting there, and it's still the absurdity, and like, what the fuck does this mean? They're not going to tell you. Like, that's kind of the beauty of it. It's like, I'm going to tie this back to some film shit. This is like Hitchcock's philosophy of like imagining the man in the axe coming towards you is far worse than actually seeing him.
Yeah.
You know, Spielberg later did that with Jaws with the shark. It's also because the damn thing didn't work. But, you know, you're talking about, like, you know, suggesting rather than flat out doing it. And not that, like, I'm trying to get political on this podcast, but, like, one thing you do particularly well, I think, with your political stuff is it's like you're not hiding what your view is, but you're not necessarily, like, there's a point to it. But it's also
there is,
like,
but there isn't.
There is, but there isn't. It's very much how you're feeling, but not necessarily in just like you were saying, just a shitting on kind of way. Because the thing is, that like I saw an interview with Trey Parker, one of the co-creators of South Park, and he was, I think I talked about this last week. But he basically, like, Chris Hardwick was interviewing him and asked him, like, okay, so like when Trump got elected, that must have been just like obviously perfect for you guys, and he said, well, you know, they have their way of how they've addressed it, but he said, you know, the thing is, we don't bring that up unless it's just genuinely funny, or it's like, we can't not acknowledge this. Because he said, you know, everybody and their mother's making a joke about Trump these days. It's like, it's just noise at this point. And what I love about your stuff is it's like, you bring in your absurdity, you bring in your view to it, but at the same time, it's not part of the noise. Yeah. It's like
I have to put him in a place that's unfamiliar, because noise is the best description that you could possibly say as far as Trump goes.
Yeah.
And humor.
Yeah.
You know, you've got late night talk shows.
Stand up. Like stand up for a while was terrible.
It's everywhere with that. So I totally bypass all of that. Even more so the fact that it's gotten to the point where it's noise now. The fact is that, okay, what are you going to do with, yet again, another Trump cartoon that's different than the others? He is such a freak on his own that what can you do with any of that? So you've got to sort of bypass that and put him even further out of context. Honestly, so I'll have him on mushrooms in his underwear.
Well, you did the Mighty Mouse one.
Yeah, and things like that.
I saw the mermaid one.
Yeah, which is really kind of funny when you think of it, that I never would have thought in a million years that I would get heat for being a political cartoonist, because I'm not a political cartoonist.
That's just something that's coming up.
I'm not even passionate about politics, and I could not give 2 shits about politics.
Yeah.
But I am very serious when it comes to human rights, and that's where most of my angle comes from.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't deal with issues. I remember someone was really angry at something I did, and he says, "You're just fanning the flames here." He says, "You're not trying to come up with any solutions here." I said, "I'm a fucking cartoonist." I said, "Where am I supposed to have solutions?"
Well, I think that
I said, I do where I vent my shit. And then if I can make somebody laugh, and all of this seems so much less frightening for a second, great.
Well,
or if you like the drawing.
This is something that we've kind of talked about. Is I feel like there's a lot of people that feel like everyone has to have an opinion, then share that opinion with certain things.
Yeah.
Whereas you can take,
and that's not just politics.
That's not just politics. That's literally everything. But I think that when you can get to a point where you've hit that point where you can create something that does kind of have those flows, but still it's not necessarily attached to that ideal.
Yeah.
That's why I talk about Get Out. I don't look at Get Out as a politically...
No, me neither.
I think the best way to view that movie is just a freaking movie that used race as a...
It's a plot device.
It's a plot device.
Yeah.
Because when you take it out of that context and you build on top of it, you start to lose things and it just gets, like, stupid. And then it's like, can somebody not just make something that doesn't have to necessarily say something about a bigger thing?
Exactly.
Like, why does everything have to be commentary?
Yes.
And Trump is exactly, why does everything have to be commentary? But the thing is that with me is that it's really not, it's gone so fast past the point that it's not really even just about Trump anymore. I'll serve up some imagery of Trump if I get an idea, because I'm just serving the idea.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Exactly.
consciously trying to go there.
Yes.
But where I do consciously go, and where I don't feel like I'm pushing any kind of buttons or anything as far as Trump goes. It's just voicing a lot of personal anger and irritability that I have about it. But the stuff that I feel where I'm really going towards the jugular vein, and I really am going towards the jugular, is racist shit straight across the board.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime I can fuck with the Klan in a drawing, anytime I can screw with someone in a red hat, I'm deliberately trying to piss those people off.
Mm-hmm.
I would relish it if I heard from a Klansman and he said, fuck you. You know what I mean? So that stuff I'm deliberately trying to antagonize. And I'm surprised I haven't gotten anthrax in my mail yet. I guess that's a good thing. I was very fascinated in what you guys had in common with the new Rambo thing. And then put that in context with what you were talking about this scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then the context of not finding about your uncle until on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now these are the things that people have a hard time with. And I find it comes up in my it's vocabulary that shows up in my conversations more and more and more these days is the term resolving.
Mm.
Of how uncomfortable people are that something doesn't resolve. Oh, it's not a very well-written song because it doesn't really resolve itself. It just sort of... I hear that more and more and more, that it's a grievance that a lot of people have. The film didn't resolve itself. It just didn't fulfill your needs as you understand them. I'm not saying that about... I'm not commenting on you guys.
Yeah.
But see... What you guys talked about Rambo makes me want to see it even more.
Good.
To me, it sounds fascinating to me that it didn't wrap itself up. Like, you left thinking, Jesus Christ, couldn't something nice have happened to this guy?
Yeah.
Well, hey, look, life is a kick in the balls, and often it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
We find out about somebody that died on Facebook.
Yeah.
We had an argument with a relative, and it was difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I lost someone when I was this age. If it was a perfect world, we would have resolved all of those things. And I'm finding, especially with film, I'm getting more and more into things that don't fulfill my understanding or my need of completion.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it goes back to the Pythons, possibly, of a scene not resolving itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if art imitates life and life imitates art and the whole 9 yards, we have to accept these things in there.
Yeah.
This is why it's kind of absurd that people put the emphasis of expecting perfection on a piece of art, because it's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite quotes, because being a Beatles fanatic, of course, anything with John Lennon is phenomenal with me. But in the mid-'60s, he had his first one-man art show. He had done all these erotic lithographs, these quick gesture drawings. And he saw a review in the paper the next day of the show, and the critic said, well, I don't know, it just didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And Lennon's response was, didn't work as what?
Yeah.
Right.
And I just thought that was phenomenal. Like, he didn't take it personally. He wasn't offended. But it's like, what do you mean it didn't work? That's like saying,
define it.
This doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's a fucking
like, how does it not work? It just is.
Mm-hmm.
it's just a bunch of drawings. What do you mean it doesn't work?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, am I supposed to solve the world's problems with an art show? And if it doesn't resolve or solve things, just like that guy sending me a really pissed off thing saying, you're doing nothing but fanning the flames, you've offered no solution. I'm a fucking cartoonist. I don't have the damn solution.
You're not supposed to have the solution.
I'm not supposed to. I'm supposed to make fun of society. That's what cartoonists do. You know what I mean? So I'm fascinated how the conversation is weaving these threads together, and I'm fascinated more with the Rambo thing because this is something that, of all of the Rambo things, I have found very, very interesting from the first one. Now, I remember the first time that I saw the first film, even though I liked it, something about it seemed like it might have been more suitable for the 70s than the time that it came out.
Right, like it was a little late.
It was a little late, yeah, exactly, because I was feeling that even though a lot of time hadn't really passed on, it seemed to me that I thought that a lot of people, unless you were old enough to have been through that, people would have not really understood the plight of the soldier who came back from Vietnam and what he endured.
Was it really like that, from what you could remember?
I don't remember anything personally like that I knew someone, but I knew about things.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew about how a lot of soldiers were treated, etc. And I wasn't so sure about that element of it, even though it was a great film. Not necessarily the element, maybe it was more to do with the scenes of him in this small northwestern town and a sheriff telling him to beat it, and he looks like a drifter, and that they lock him up and blah 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 blah.
It bothered me watching that recently, how horribly they treat him, and he didn't do anything wrong. That really messed with me.
But it has even more of a context in relation to the other films. So as the other films were made, and I saw those, and I percolated all of the ingredients of those films, now I don't feel that way about the first one, because now the first one, people are able to sort of like make that connection now that this is where he came from, and look at kind of how what he still has to deal with the same kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
It's like he's looked at as this sort of scumbag, but he's not a scumbag when they need him for something.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a constant thing that keeps coming up, and the fact that he keeps trying to, in some ways, get away from that, and every time that he does, it just sort of catches up to him.
Pulls it back.
Inevitably, no matter where he is, Richard Crenner shows up somewhere. It's like, Jesus Christ, what are you doing, following me?
Well, honestly, like my favorite
Which
thing.
is what I loved it when he was in Tibet and he was helping.
I was
build
literally
that
about to say that. Yeah. My favorite. I think that's my favorite scene in the third one. And the thing is, people rag on the third one. It's like, it's dated, but I watched it and I was just like, my favorite thing, and I think, like, I love the Rocky films. I think
me too.
I particularly like the first one, and Rocky Balboa. I thought were my favorite ones.
Same here.
But I think in terms of his, like, the depth of performance, I think Stallone as Rambo, particularly in the first one, and it carried through in the other
Copland.
ones. But
it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, but like with the first Rambo, First Blood, I just think that's the performance of his career. Like, particularly when, like, Colonel Troutman goes to confront him when he's making the final, like, Alamo last stand in the police station. And he just breaks down crying.
Yeah.
And I just, like, holy shit, this guy's an actor. But I actually, in my drama class in high school, we had to give a monologue. I did that monologue.
Really?
Yeah, it was really cool. My favorite thing in Rambo 3 is at the beginning, when he's in Tibet, like you said, and Colonel Troutman's like, look, we got to go do this thing in Afghanistan. I want you there with me. I'm going myself. And the most poignant thing that Rambo says back to him is he's just like, I understand, I can't. And Troutman's kind of like prodding at him. He's just like, sir, it's got to end for me at some point.
Yeah.
And then Troutman obviously he's not happy about it because he wanted him there, but he's just like, I understand. And he like concedes and he lets him have it. And he's just like, I respect that. I'll let you go. And then I think that makes it even more poignant when it's like Colonel Troutman gets captured and they come back and it's just like Rambo doesn't even need like fucking Red Foreman from that 70s show to tell him what happened. It's just like, where is he?
Yeah.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really cool about the fourth film too, is the fact that at that point he literally, all the people he cares about are dead.
Yeah.
Like, and they don't directly acknowledge Colonel Troutman having died, but it's just like, because the actor Richard Crenna, you said, he had died, and they dedicated the film to him. But they, rather than like acknowledging it, I think they made this smart choice to just like, let's just have it where Rambo's by himself. It's about him trying to find some sort of thing to live for.
Yeah.
And he saves these missionaries because he still has a moral code. Even with all the fucked up shit he's done, he still has that moral code. Mm-hmm. And he goes and helps. And I love that the mercenaries give him shit. It's like, oh, the boatman's going with us now. And then he's just like, he's got his bow. He's like, okay. And then they give him shit. And then he shows up and saves their asses later on. Yeah. But, I like like that monologue he gives when he's got like the bow in the one dude's face. And he's just like, think one of us that isn't wanting to be someplace else, but this is what we do, who we are. Mm-hmm. And he's just like, live for nothing or die for something. And I thought that was really poignant. Stallone directed that one too. Yeah. I thought that was really poignant because he's just like, look, we're all fucked up. We are all doing fucked up things, but it's just like he's taking what the Julie Benz missionary had said to him, and that it's just like, wanting to save a life is more noble than taking a life. And they're just like, look, he's like, we do this, but if we do this to save some good people, it's worth it. Yeah. And I don't know, that's another reason I thought that film was so conclusive. And it's just, I love that character so much. And I just, like you said, I want him to just have, like, even in some form or fashion, even if it's in death, I want him to have some sort of, like, win.
But see, even by not fulfilling that, I think a film can still serve a really, really good point. Because this is the crux of what it's like to be a human being, because it doesn't always work out, but we want it to. Mm-hmm. So by the film not working out and resolving in the way that we wanted it to, our response is, oh, but I wanted it to. Mm-hmm. So now you're left,
it's
but I
wanting the fantasy, yeah.
Absolutely.
I got you.
That, and it's like that. I mean, we can think of so many things in our lives that were either painful or disappointing and think, okay, that didn't work out, and it is what it is. Mm-hmm. One film that really aggravated the shit out of me that went in the opposite direction, where I felt was manipulative, was that remake of Wings of Desire.
I didn't see it.
I've not heard of this.
If you guys have ever seen Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire, you should see that. It's a German director, I believe. And long story short, it's about an angel who falls in love with a mortal woman, and he's got decisions to make of what he is and whether he wants to be mortal and be with her. So there's all this great sort of song and dance between these two characters in the original film. But the remake was done with Nicolas Cage and Meg Ryan. And this whole film was just a big setup only for her to get smashed by a bus and die at the end, which has nothing to do with the fucking film.
And it didn't happen in the
And it didn't happen in the movie. It was total fucking manipulation. Now, what made the original beautiful and not a cliche was that it's not like, oh, I feel good. Everything worked out in the end. No, people had to make difficult choices. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's been ages since I've seen it. I mean, easily like 20 years or more. And I'm trying to get clear on the memory of it because I'm thinking that they both sort of decide and understand that he needs to be where he is. Mm-hmm. So there's this bittersweet. Nobody dies, but they don't get to be together. Mm-hmm. But there's still the sharing of how they felt for another. So to spend an entire movie setting all of this stuff up, and she gets creamed by a bus, is just...
That's shock value.
Not necessarily shock value, but it's like manipulative, I think. Yeah. There's some element of wanting to manipulate the viewer in that way. And that it's not that it didn't work out, because it didn't work out in the original. But this was just like a cheese job.
Yeah. Well, the way it didn't work out, you have something that it builds on top of itself.
Yeah.
But for the bus thing,
there's still a payoff in the sense that they can't be together, but it's not as like soap opera.
Right. Yeah. Now, like from the Christopher Reeve Superman, one of my favorite things is when Lois Lane dies in that earthquake, and Superman's totally devastated. Now, okay, we could say, no, we're going to go for the grit, and Lois Lane is dead, and Superman's just going to have to deal with it. all right, we could go for it that way and be like some hard-boiled
Christopher
film
Nolan
noir or
Yeah.
something like that.
Everything's tight butthole serious all the fucking time. Yeah.
But here's the thing with that. Superman is confronted for the first time, probably the only other time in his life other than losing
His father. That scene kicked me in the balls. Holy shit.
Yeah. Anybody who's lost can relate to those things. Why I didn't feel that was manipulative in the okay, so she dies and then Superman brings her back to life. It's like, oh, come on. That was just like, no, I didn't look at it that way because it wasn't as easy to do that because Superman had to make a decision. Mm-hmm. And he says, I'm fucking with time. I'm fucking with history. I could totally be screwing up something by
but it's
doing
human.
this. And this is how you make Superman more human than a human being. Mm-hmm. Because Superman makes an irrational decision because he follows his heart to do it. Mm-hmm. And he says, I'll take my chances. I'll suffer the consequences from it.
If you don't mind, I'd like to mention, not necessarily the same thing, but there's a similar scene that goes very differently in Man of Steel that really stuck with me, and it's when Jonathan Kent dies in that film.
Yeah.
And that's not a heart attack. It's he dies in a tornado, and it's like, one of those big, okay, this is where this is where a body
like gets slammed into a bomb.
No, like
that shit was wild. It was. I remember that.
but what I loved about the scene was the whole point of the scene is that Jonathan Kent, I think Clark's 16 or something, and they're in the middle of this highway. There's this huge traffic jam, and then all of a sudden this tornado is coming towards them. And Jonathan's trying to live by example, and he's telling Clark, it's like, here, get your mother under the overpass, get everybody there, and he's ushering all the people to go there. He's trying to get people to safety. And long story short, he gets caught in his car. Actually, he's trying to save the dog.
So, yeah.
And he gets caught in the car. And Clark, at this point, he's not Superman in the sense that he can fly, but he can do shit.
He knows he can do shit.
And he's had these little act of God moments throughout his upbringing. And there's this beautiful moment. It breaks my heart every time I see it.
Now I think about it, that was really
well
done.
It's kind of this. I feel like it's the same point, but it's on a different sense or a different sense. It's he's about to go and save his dad. The tornado's coming towards him, and Jonathan Kent sees he's about to do it, and he just he doesn't say a word. He just sticks his hand up, and just this look on his face says no. Yeah. Just let this happen, and the tornado just sweeps over him. It's really beautiful. It's not like he starts slamming into a building.
I would watch that. I would watch that.
It doesn't look like someone threw a plastic bag full of tomatoes against
It wasn't directed. That scene was not directed by Quentin Tarantino.
But no, it's this really poignant, beautiful scene. The music's it's this very quiet piano bit. And he just and Clark is just in agony, but the whole point of the scene is he's like, I want you to reveal yourself to the world when you're ready. It's your decision. I don't want this to be out of your control. And I just thought that was so beautiful.
Also thought it went to go to the point that you can't save everybody.
That's
Even
true.
though he
That's
literally
true.
could have saved him.
And that's why I think things like that, it doesn't always work out everywhere.
Yeah.
And if to portray that most effectively is to not cheapen it for just emotional things. I'm sure there's tons of films that I could reach back into the cobwebs and pull out where there was some deliberate manipulation that it was purely for a manipulation factor that it didn't add to it that the character died or whatnot. You know, it wasn't like we know why Ben Kenobi got struck down in a lightsaber fight. Yeah. It had to happen. Yeah. It was not so the viewer would
he was passing the torch to Luke.
Absolutely, and it was just something that simply had to happen.
I love that moment because I rewatched that exact scene and Luke's like, Ben, and then all of a sudden I love how he sees Luke. And he doesn't. It's not even like a giving up, or not even a giving up the fight kind of thing. He just holds his lightsaber up in a very dignified way. Vader strikes him down, but it's just there's this look of just peace on his face. He's like, he's got this. Yeah. And then he just lets it happen, and then later on, 20 minutes later, Luke blows up the fucking Death Star. Yeah. I love Star Wars. I wanted to, in kind of a segue back to for something Jeremiah and I talked about on his podcast is kind of hero figures, and obviously you got to meet one of yours. You talked about that earlier. Who would you say, if you had to pick 5, are your hero figures, whether it's art, music, film, what have you?
5?
Honestly, that's a lot. Damn.
Would you rather have 3?
No. It's hard narrowing it down to 5. Here, do they have to be dead or alive?
Whatever you want.
Well, see, that would be hard. The Beatles alone would take up 4 of those, and then it'd leave me 1. Yeah, there's just way too many. I mean, there's a lot of people. Jack Kerouac would have been one of them. I am lucky that I did get to correspond with William Burroughs, the author of Naked Lunch.
Really?
Yeah, the early 90s, and I was doing underground comics. I was in a very experimental phase, and he was a massive influence on me at that time. Naked Lunch and other books, and just this real whacked out stuff. But his method of doing it was so non-linear that it got me over. I never thought of myself as a writer. I don't consider myself a writer, but I'm the only one that I have that can write for my stuff, so I've been forced to have to write.
Take on the 2 jobs,
and then in the essence, I know how to do that. Either writing humorously or writing otherwise, in a review or whatnot.
Even your Facebook posts are pretty deep and profound.
Yeah, I think I do okay for an untrained guy. But the thing is that Burroughs got me over that sort of being intimidated by the word. So because of his influence, I was doing a lot of experimental stuff where there was more writing involved to coincide with the visuals. Long story short, because I was in self-publishing at the time, this was the early 90s, and indie shit was big. It was pre-internet, so you had a mail-order business is how you did this. You printed up your stuff. There was a catalog called Fact Sheet 5, which was totally dedicated to underground and self-publishing. It had reviews of film, music, literature, art, comics, and it was international. It was like a Sears catalog. It was huge. So you do your book, you send it in, they do a review of it. You also could buy ad space, advertise your thing, get a post office box like we all did in those days, and then money came in. It wasn't enough for me to retire on, but I certainly made, along with my friend who I did the book with, an old art school buddy, he did a bunch of his stuff and I did a bunch of ours, and we financed it together. But we made enough off of that where we were able to put that towards getting another printing. To me, that was a victory over a lot of aggravation and hassles I was having in the commercial art field, because here was stuff of mine that made a big deal because it was selling on its own terms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't have a Ferrari in my driveway, but I didn't care.
Yeah.
The bottom line is that through that whole system, I was selling comic books all over the world.
You're reaching people.
Yeah. All over Europe, stuff was being sold. I had sales in Africa. I had sales in Asia.
Oh, wow.
It was everywhere. Prisons.
Oh my!
I actually got a letter. I look up in the thing here. It says it came from Sing Sing. I saw another one from Leavenworth. So prisoners are buying this shit along with everybody else in the world. But long story short, Burroughs, because I was in that whole circle, other publishers and stuff would want to trade. This was still the wave of the zine and all that other shit. But I had my stuff was not Xerox and stapled together. It was professionally printed.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask how you went about doing it.
Yeah, no, we saved our money and had it printed. So I got something from another publisher. People were always wanting to swap zines, and I liked doing that. It was good courtesy, and it was good brotherhood and camaraderie to do that.
Was it kind of like networking too, in a way?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, because then people would say, is it okay if I borrow this and print this in my thing? Yeah. So not everything was about the almighty dime.
Yeah.
You got yourself around. Some guy from Finland one time sent me a letter, and he said, could I have your permission to print up postcards of these? He says, I'll send you, 100 of them. Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So he prints up a whole bunch of postcards, and a month later, 100 of them show up in my mailbox in a box. The Burroughs thing. So somebody sent me a publication of theirs, and on the back cover of it said, "You can contact William Burroughs at blah 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 blah, Lawrence, Kansas." Now I recognized the address, but I thought, well, maybe he lives there and maybe he doesn't. I don't know how old that is. So long
or it's
story
like a
short,
post office box or something like that.
Oh, it was his house, I think. His
Mm.
house and his street address.
Dang.
But he was very accessible. Everybody from Kurt Cobain to whoever would show up at his house and hang out and shoot guns.
Nice.
But
it's like Hunter S. Thompson shit right there.
Yeah. So I thought to myself, I really, really want to communicate with him because he's one of my favorites. And, he's an old man. He might not be around forever. I should strike while the iron's hot. So I wrote him a letter saying I thanked him for how much he influenced me and taught me and blah, blah, blah. And I sent in a copy of a story that I had written and illustrated that was going in my new comic book that was heavily influenced by his writing technique. So I mailed that off to him, and it was probably about maybe a month or two later, I got a card and a letter in my mailbox, and I looked at the back of the envelope, and it said W.S. Burroughs, blah, 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 Lawrence, Kansas. So I opened it up, and it was like a greeting card, but the front of the greeting card was one of a series of paintings he was working on at the time where he was using plate glass windows instead of canvas. Mm-hmm. There were these like sort of splatter effects on the glass and stuff. And on the inside, he said, "Dear Eric Peterson, thank you very much for blah, 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 blah," and then signed it, "Yours in Chaos, William S. Burroughs."
Yours in Chaos? That's awesome.
And signed it. And that's like one of my most treasured possessions. I would not give that up for $1 million. So that's kind of a lot of information to sort of answer.
No, it's beautiful.
It's a direct question. So the Burroughs, even though I never met him in person, that was an intimate moment.
He took the time to reply to you.
Yeah, and it was intimate to see handwriting. It was different in those days because there was no email.
Right.
So you had a tangible thing.
Mm-hmm.
You could see the shaky hand that wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
There was an intimacy and an exchange like that. But as far as any of my other people go, there's like way too many people. I don't even know if I could even begin to try to get it down to like 5.
Well,
now it was.
I think that was
people that you'd want to meet or hang out with, or what's the ultimate goal of the.
For me, it was just like influences and honestly like just people you had been able to reach out to and had like a either correspondence or had some sort of like engagement with.
As far as artists or cartoonists or illustrators go, if I had to pick my top 2, I mean, there's so many of them. It's like I say, all right, well, if I do that, then I forget that, and if I do that, I forget that. But if I really, really had to be pressed for filling 2 other spots, without doubt would be Charles Addams. I don't know if you guys.
I don't, unfortunately.
He was the creator of the Addams Family.
Oh no way! Really?
Yeah, but his New Yorker cartoons, if you ever get a chance, look up Charles Addams' New Yorker cartoons. I first was exposed to him, I knew about the Addams Family as a kid growing up. It was in reruns, but it was nothing that blew my mind. To some people, the Addams Family is like their childhood, but I was never.
Well, the Munsters came before that, right?
No, that came after.
Oh, okay.
God, I forget. I'm trying to remember because my grandmother always watched PBS all the time. I'm trying to think so there was a lot of shit that I got into because I'd be walking by and my grandmother had something on and it would catch my attention and then I'd end up watching it with her. So I think that might have been what happened with this. But I saw this documentary on this very grandfatherly looking guy with the most morbid, wicked sense of humor. but with the most exquisite illustrations. And the more I listened to this guy, and he's taking them around his house, and he just looks like someone's grandpa. And he's pointing out to the interviewer, who's sitting under these crossbows that are on the wall behind him and battle axes, that the coffee table that he's got his cup on is actually a mortician's drying out table when they were bombed.
Oh my god.
I was like, ugh. So there's all this creepy shit in his house.
Yeah.
But what was so cool about Charles Addams is that he was wonderful and creepy, but he wasn't like how it is with people who are like that now, where it's a big performance, like a David Lynch or a Crispin Glover, where it's just everything is just so over the top,
and eccentric.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, Charles Addams could fit in anywhere, but yet there was this level of, and it's important to say this, playful dimension. There was nothing cruel in it. There was nothing where you looked at it and you were like, I don't know, something's not right about this guy.
Yeah.
And they're showing these wonderful cartoons of his Addams Family creations and all these morbid things. And this one particular cartoon that's my favorite, of this beautiful illustration of this old Gothic house done in this beautiful black and white gray wash renderings of this exaggerated perspective of like you're seeing it from the top of the top, what do you call it, attic area of this Gothic house, and down at the bottom there's snow on the ground and there's carolers at the front porch and everything and Christmas wreaths and stuff, but where you're seeing the camera is above the top of the roof, so everything is in perspective, and the carolers are down here. And on the roof are the entire Addams family with a cauldron of boiling oil that they're about to dump onto these people down in front. And I thought, I wish this guy was my grandfather. It blew my mind. And Dr. Seuss is the other one. And Maurice Sendak is the other one.
Nice.
Well, let me ask you this, because we talked about this when I dropped by the store the other day. What were the cartoons you watched as a kid? Because you grew up in the 60s and 70s, so I imagine you just had a gold
I have
mind.
fondness for the things that were really influential, obviously, and then I have fondness for the things that are really bad. The stuff that was truly horrendous but is very dear to my heart is stuff like Super Friends. Okay. I could go on about the Super Friends.
Tell him about like the thing where they just have them on the platform.
Everything was just wrong about this.
My little brother went and watched the entire series because they put it on Netflix. So I would like walk through and see some of it. So I'm like a little familiar with it.
To try to get it in its essence, during that period of time, they didn't put a lot of stock in Saturday morning cartoons, both as far as animation went and everything else. So they were really cutting corners on a lot of stuff. The stuff that went out the window mostly was story.
Okay.
It would always be similar subject matter, but in order to get around not having to write anything, they would always have this narrator explaining everything that was going on, because they figured the kids wouldn't be able to follow this otherwise, because they knew they weren't being concise in the way that they developed this. Right. So all of a sudden you'd hear, Aquaman walking over there. And it's like, well, we can see that he's doing that. You don't need to
why the fuck isn't he swimming?
Yeah. And the other thing that was cheap in the animation was the fact that whenever they had to do the Super Friends in a group, they didn't want to be animating them separately. So most of them never moved, and one of them might have been moving. But if they had to move as a unit, the writers and animators developed this thing that they called the Super Friends sled. And all it was that it looked like this big sheet of black construction paper that they would stand on, and it would move like a hovercraft.
Oh my god!
To take them to, so that eliminated having to draw them sitting down.
Yeah.
They didn't have to draw chairs.
Walking.
You could move them all at the same time.
Oh
so
my
the
god.
sled that they would all take, and it was just this big black square that they would stand on, and then it was absurd.
What in the world?
And we laughed at it and made fun of it.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, I was also very lucky that I grew up with Bugs Bunny Roadrunner cartoons. Now, to clarify, anybody that's older than I am, or it's my age and older, knows those as Warner Brothers cartoons.
Yes.
Or Merry Melodies, or whatever you want to call them. When those were sort of redone for Saturday morning cartoons, I think some of those were done in the mid-'60s. Even though they were still very good, you could still see the difference between what was on the Saturday morning cartoon and the ones that were done in the 40s. You know, take any Daffy Duck cartoon. So the stuff that I saw on Saturday mornings were probably made in the mid-'60s. Chuck Jones directed it, so it was all still very good stuff.
Yeah.
But there was a clear difference between what I saw on Saturday morning and what I saw when I came home from school. When I came home from school, the Warner Brothers cartoons that they showed were from the 40s, so you're seeing Duck Dodgers in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Clearly the animation and drawing was leagues beyond. As good as the Saturday morning stuff was, the 40s shit was just kicked it out.
Holds up.
Kicked it out of the water. Oh, hell yeah. I mean, there's just a... So, my childhood with Saturday morning cartoons was mixed with these things, you know? And, like I say, the most magical stuff was even all the way up until my teens. You had, when you got home from school, there would be half hour of what they called Tom and Jerry. So it would be all those MGM. That's where I first saw Tex Avery for the first time. And Tex Avery just blew my mind and became a hero.
Yeah.
You had the old Popeye cartoons from the Fleischer Studios that was on in the afternoon.
I know Fleischer did those.
So and then you had Mighty Mouse was on. Now at the time they also showed a lot of Hanna-Barbera stuff. You know, when you were a kid in the 70s, all afternoon was nothing but cartoons. So if you stayed home from school, you could watch conceivably watched Hanna-Barbera cartoons from about 1 in the afternoon to about 4:30.
Oh, wow.
And it would be Yogi Bear, and then Huckleberry Hound, and then Top Cat, and then whatever.
Scooby-Doo.
Well, that came on much later. But a lot of those Hanna-Barbera things that I was watching at that age, these were things that were done in the 50s and 60s. Now, because I was into Tex Avery and MGM, and I loved the Warner Brothers stuff, when I looked at the Hanna-Barbera stuff, I didn't think that it was good. And I made a judgment on good versus... But as I got older, I was educated more, and I got to see style
right
is different. So now I have especially now I am a huge fan of the real early Yogi Bear cartoons that were shown in the 50s. The backgrounds alone are to die for because they're just so simple. I mean, they show like Yogi in the woods and there's snow on the ground. It's a completely white background, but there's just a couple of quick brown strokes, and then literally like someone took a green marker and made this squiggle over it. But it works and it looks great.
Yeah.
You know, but at the time, as a kid, I couldn't get my mind around it. It's kind of like, you know, the Warner Brothers 40 cartoons pulled all the stops, and this was like uber art and uber animation, the whole 9 yards. Hanna-Barbera stuff was financially stripped down for television, and for all purposes, production had to narrow in order for them to be able to do this in a small confine. But that didn't mean that it was of less of quality. I could only understand that as I got older.
Gotcha.
And I started to realize that even if it was that way, that they had budgets to do, they couldn't do all this mind-blowing stuff. The bottom line is it blew minds in its own way of simplicity.
Right. And just
Textured backgrounds that looked like he cut out a piece of construction paper. I mean, long before a South Park kind of look. You know. So that stuff was really fascinating. Combination of those things and the fact that there was a plethora of old horror films.
What were your favorites?
Of horror films?
Yeah.
Well, Them was one of them. That always creeped me the fuck out. Some of the scenes that bothered me the most in that was in the beginning when the local sheriff and deputy are out in the desert and they come to an RV that's just absolutely torn to shit and there's stuff thrown everywhere and they can't find the people who were there. And there's this creepy wind blowing. Clearly it's on a sound stage. It's not like actually out in the desert. Right. But that only made it look creepier.
Yeah. Like it looked more like dead and synthetic.
And then I think at some point you're hearing that noise of the ants.
Yeah.
And then eventually, like, I think at some point you finally see this massive ant head come up over the top part of the trailer, and I think it killed both. It's been ages since I saw it, but they had killed both of those guys. And then some other police department came to investigate why those cops went missing, and there was no trace of them. By that point, the ants were descending upon the city.
Right.
But the thing that creeped me out the most was the guy who you guys will recognize from Shawshank Redemption. Why is his name escaping?
Brooks?
Ben, no, Ben was the character's name. The guy that hung himself. What's that
Brooks.
actor's name?
James Whitmore. He was also in Planet of the Apes. He's one of the council members.
Absolutely. Mandingus or something, wasn't that the guy that he played or something?
In Planet of the Apes? I can't remember the name, but I just remember him being like...
Well, he played the lead. He played the lead in Them.
I didn't know that.
And he died at the end. I remember when we saw it the first time, he's down in a subway, and the ants are just like all over the city. And he's trying to push these people into this air duct or something to get them out of the way. And before he can get in, this ant gets him in those pinchers. And that just freaked me the fuck up.
Sure, yeah.
Mostly because we weren't used to seeing lead characters die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We were kids of TV just like anybody else. But we were used to the star never dies.
Yeah.
It really
that's the one you can count on.
Yeah, it really messed me up that like, what just happened, here?
Yeah.
It was weird. So Them was one of them. If I had to pick from my childhood the thing that creeped me out the most and fucked me up the most, I love talking about, was a movie called The Leech Woman. And it was a film made in the 50s. When they were grade B, they were even more creepy.
Okay.
Did it have like that rawness to it?
Yeah, and especially it being in black and white, there's something cold, and the dialogue delivery was weird. There's just, because it's like that, it just lends itself for weirdness to sort of permeate everything. I don't know how that happens, but it manages to. Drive-in movies in those days were the same way. If you went and saw, no matter how bad the horror film was, there was something about its low budgetness that allowed it to get rank real fast in a weird kind of way. And this movie was definitely one of them. But the bottom line of this movie is there's this professor of anthropology. He's obsessed about this tribe that he heard about, that they have discovered a secret of youth. Some African tribe. He's got this long-suffering wife who's tired of his farting around with college girls, and she feels she can't, she's like 40, she can't compete with these girls. He's a real prick, yada yada. So he decides he's going to meet her halfway, and why don't you come with me on the safari and we'll reconnect and blah, 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 blah. So they go, okay? And then they finally, they come to the village of the tribe. And the head of the tribe is this chiefess, this older than dirt woman that looks like she's mummified and she's moving around. And she invites them to participate in the ceremony so they can witness this
how it
magic.
happens. Yeah.
So the ritual's happening. They partake at night, and the secret to it is there's a couple of components. There's this magic powder that they don't explain exactly what it is, but a major component is that they have to sacrifice a male in order to complete the magic transformation. There's some sort of spinal fluid that they retrieve by puncturing the spine at the base of the neck. And how they do that is that she wears this ring with this weird thorn on the end of it, hits him in the back of the neck with that, which kills him. Then they drag the guy off. And then they dump this spinal fluid in with this potion, and then she drinks it. Now, how they did it, because it's a low-budget film, first, she selects the male. This is the important thing out of it. So she picks some tribe member. He's struggling, and they grab him. They bring him over to some hollowed-out log that's got some foaming stuff in it, and they push his face down in it, and it drugs him unconscious. And then they drag him over the altar to where the old lady's sitting, and she hits him in the back of the neck, and they mix the potion, and she knocks it back, and then she makes these faces like she's in pain. Where all this smoke comes from, I don't know. All this
fog machine.
All this fog appears, and then when it dissipates, she's like 25 years old. And everyone's like, oh, fuck, wow. All right, so she says as a gift, she says to the woman, I'm going to let you have your ritual, and you select your man. So the next night, the woman is there, the professor's wife. She picks her husband.
Oh, shit.
He's like, hey! And they grab him, they push his face down in that foaming fog. They drag his, body over to her. She hits him in the back of the head with that. And then she drinks the potion. The mysterious fog comes back. And then there's a 22-year-old woman sitting there. Oh, my God. She can't believe it. She's just absolutely enraptured. So, the husband's college partner, who's also an anthropologist, he gets greedy. And he thinks, I'm going to snag this shit and I'm going to take it back and find out how to mass produce it. So he tells her what he's going to do, and they're going to get out of there. So next night, he manages to get a hold of the bag that's got this magic shit in there. He starts shooting at everybody, and they run off into the jungle. And as they're running at some point, he falls into a quicksand patch. Now here's the other scene that really freaked me out. Is he's sinking, and he's like, help, Mary, help me. And she's like, not until you give me the bag. He says, you pull me out of here first. She says, give me the bag and I'll pull you out of there. He says, no way. She says, give me the bag or I'm going to let you drown. All right, so he throws the bag up on the shoreline there. And she grabs this big stick that was over part of it. And she reaches out. He's about ready to go under, and he grabs the end of the stick, and she's pulling him. And as she pulled him up to the edge, she stops for a second. He says, pull me up. And then that's when she raises this big rock, and she cracks him one right in the fucking head. And then they show him slowly start sinking. That fucking wigged me out. That wigged me out big time.
Like, she made the effort to pull him back up.
It was the fact that she
him.
tricked him, and I had never seen anything like quicksand before at that age. The thought of this mud that this guy was sinking in, and then she betrayed him and cracked him with that rock. The whole thing was just fucking weird.
Yeah.
It weirded me out that she picked the husband and betrayed him. So fast forward. Yeah. So it's called The Leech Woman because she needs to keep getting more and more males to maintain this youth.
Yeah.
Now, the drawback that no one ever explained was that it ages you 3 times as fast.
Oh, shit.
So by the time she got home, they show her at night. She had just showered. She's got her bathrobe on. She steps in front of the mirror and she sees she's got gray in her hair and some wrinkles. And she starts to freak out. She says, "Oh my God, I look older than I left."
Yeah.
Okay, now she starts to figure it out fast. So then it gets even more fucking creepy that she's hitting on these fucking college kids.
Oh, God.
And it's like their mom.
Yeah.
And she's bringing these college kids back to her apartment because they think they're going to get laid.
Yeah.
And all of that was just really And then she kills them. Oh, God, I'm young again.
Yeah.
Oh, God. That's...
And then finally what happens...
succubus bullshit.
Yeah, so finally what happens is something happens where the police catch on... The police catch on to who's committed these murders and stuff, and they show up at her apartment, and the stuff wears off even faster this time. Well, this time she's like 90.
So
like a
she's
pig.
like, yeah.
And she sees her... As they kick the door in, she was holding up a mirror to see herself and saw this 90-year-old woman there.
It's like the picture of Dorian Gray.
Yeah. And she's like... she like freaks out, gets startled when they kick the door in, and she's horrified. She doesn't want them to see her, so she's backing up. And they're trying to, they're trying to reach out to her, and she falls out the window and gets hit by a car.
Oh my
Oh, my God.
And that's the end of the movie.
That's awesome.
So
When does it come out?
she falls
Damn.
on the sidewalk right as some car runs her over.
Dang.
And that was
That's
the end of
what's
the
up,
movie.
though,
Listen,
right?
this is how we end movies now. Just somebody gets hit by a bus.
So
Whew.
that kind of stuff, like when you're a kid, it's just like really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And
it
there's
fucks
some-
with
and
you. You've
then-
never seen something that
Yeah.
macabre.
And
you know?
well, it's more than that because it's like when something's over the top with gore, or even if you don't go for gore, because gore is really not frightening.
Mm-hmm.
We'll use Jaws as an
Yeah.
example again. It's not the gore that was in it that made it frightening, because that came out in 1974. I was in the 4th grade. That's still a kid. That was right around the age that I was seeing a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Jaws was completely horrifying to me, but horrifying in a whole other different way. Jaws wasn't creepy. There wasn't this sort of like you needed a bath after you were done
You
watching.
felt gross,
These
yeah.
films left you feeling
Yeah.
gross.
Yeah. No,
Because they were fucked up people that were like, don't look at me! There was all that kind of, I'm horrified at my appearance.
Yeah.
I'm a monster, don't look at me kind of crap. There was something really disturbing about seeing people all of a sudden losing control and seeing it in themselves and then just mentally losing it.
Yeah.
That seemed so much worse than a shark
Just
eating
eating
people.
Well, because this is what it is. Like, when a shark kills somebody, it makes sense. It's a
Yeah.
predatory animal. You're in the fucking water. You're in its territory. That's what happens. But, like, with that, it's just like... They're trying to do something that's, like, I guess... Like, not, like, of this earth or of this world. And it blows up in their faces, and they're just, like, coming to their complete demise. There's a movie... You know how I did the Inktober thing last year?
Yeah.
I watched horror movies.
Yeah.
The movie that fucked me up very similarly to this is the Jeff Goldblum Fly movie.
I've always been told to watch that. I've not
It's
seen it yet.
fucked.
Yeah,
It is so fucked
That's
up.
another one. Now, it's funny that you mentioned that, because now that one manages to pull off all of it. Because
I had to have a shower.
I felt like I definitely needed a shower after that one. The first one left me with a lot of that. The second one just seemed...
I never saw that one.
Otherworldly. Where it just got... It got really disturbing and really weird on a whole other context.
Because the first one was fucked up as it was.
Yeah. But so much of it was fucked. I think the people that get into... The best way that I think that you can scare someone and really, really get inside their head is that most people... It doesn't have to be about some paranormal thing. It doesn't have to be about dying. It doesn't have to be about these subjects of ghost stories that scare us. It's really a no-brainer. You can kind of get into someone's head and really fuck with it and really scare them by showing them loss of control.
Mm-hmm.
Cronenberg is a perfect example of a director who has built a career on that. Everything of his was about losing control, but it was never over the top losing control where you're running around like Leatherface with a chainsaw. You know what I mean? There was something sterile.
Well, I think it sounds like it goes. It sounds like it goes to the point of like the human being. You are a monster. Can you
it's a metamorphosis.
That? Yeah, it's like, do you control the monster within you? Like everyone has some deep. thing.
And like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was always one of my favorites, which was another thing that freaked me out because long before I ever read the book. See, I'm also of I think possibly the last generation of drive-ins. Even though we have a drive-in. Was it Stardust or something? It's called.
I think it's Stardust. Yeah. I need to go by.
Same. I've never been to a drive-in.
There's nothing quite like a drive-in for horror movies. Mm-hmm. That's just, even though a lot of people don't like Rob Zombie, that's what I like about Devil's Rejects. For a perfect example, is that he's someone that he's of my age. He grew up in the same era. A lot of his influences for these is what a horror movie looked like at a drive-in. Mm-hmm. It's grainy. The film didn't look very good. There was crackling.
Dirty,
deteriorating. There's all of that stuff that is going on in his films was at the drive-in. And I remember seeing some strange adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And a lot of movies from the 50s on were recycling these same themes, but they were changing the titles of them. Mm-hmm. So it had something like The Man of Two Faces or something. They didn't call it Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, even though it was that story and those were those characters.
It's like they just didn't get the licensing from like
or something to that degree. And I think it was a British film because the way that the colors looked and everything, and the type of actors reminded me of the British Hammer films, which I've always been a big fan of. Mm-hmm. I still love that.
Those stuff. That's like the 70s,
like the
really
Christopher Lee, Dracula and stuff like that. They made a lot of good, cool shit, but also a lot of bad shit. But even the bad shit is really cool. But Hammer had its own look. The color was otherworldly, and that film company truly knew how to capture Gothic or Transylvanian or Edgar Allan Poe kind of vibe. Skeletal trees on a dirt road at night and you're riding a horse by yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, they really managed to capture a lot of that. And this film had that same quality. But I will never forget how disturbed I was when he no longer had control of Mr. Hyde anymore. Mm-hmm. And the first time he became aware of this was that he woke up one morning and he was covered in blood.
Oh shit!
And the way that color looked on these European films, I mean, it was like red,
very saturated.
Yeah. And you know, he's bare chested and he's got these satin sheets and it's this huge bed, and there was something about the contrast of the size of that bed and him with no shirt on, and he had blood on him, and he started to freak out. And that really, really freaked me out because it was very poignant, and you were very aware that he had totally lost control of this. Now it manifests on its own, and now he realizes, I've got fucking blood on me. I killed somebody last night. I have no memory of doing it because it wasn't me. I was Mr. Hyde. Yeah. That really freaked me the fuck out. Till this day, I can't find that film.
Really?
I don't know. I've talked to film buffs. I've talked to collectors. Nobody knows what I'm talking about, and nobody can find it.
What was it called?
It was either called... Now, here's where your research... It's going to take you to The Man with Two Heads, which is that Ray Milland and Rosie Greer film, where this black man and a racist are together in one body. And it's the racist is like right here, two-headed.
Right.
Now, every time I try to find the film I'm looking for, the search engine takes me to that movie. And that's called The Man with Two Heads or something to that degree.
You said it was a Hammer film, though?
It had that look. Roughly, I'm going to guess and say that the film... When I saw it, it was the early 70s. I'm going to guess and say that the film probably came out 69, 70, 71, somewhere around there. And I have tried finding that. I've even searched under Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I cannot find out what that thing was. But the bottom line is loss of control.
And for it to manifest,
the supreme, spine-chilling alien was like that.
Well, he had we're gonna fix that.
Absolute loss of control, but loss of control in a confined space,
which is super
claustrophobia.
It's a haunted house in space.
Now I saw that when that first came out, and me and my younger brother couldn't breathe. Now, that was a very, very new type of horror film that we never experienced before. And the element of claustrophobia was stifling in that movie. And the fact that they couldn't get away. One of my favorite scenes is when Captain Dallas is up in one of the air ducts. And they're monitoring him on the computer. And all of a sudden, they see him on there with this glowing light. And then all of a sudden, this other light comes into the frame. And it's beep.
You're going to love it.
Yeah.
I don't want to
no, you're fine. You're fine.
You've never seen it?
I've not seen it.
Okay, I'm not going to tell you what happened. But the fact that this is a very primitive computer.
Right.
It almost looks like... Have you guys ever seen...
It's like Space Invaders or some shit.
Worse than that, TV tennis.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, God.
It was that type of computer.
Oh, my gosh.
But there's something about seeing this green line on the screen. He's a dot, and the green line is deep, deep.
Jeez.
And they're like, Dallas, get out of there. There's something coming towards you. Get out of there now. And he can't see anything. He's flashing his light around. There's steam everywhere coming out of shit. There's pipes. There's water dripping. And the level of tension in a confined space, this was an absolutely perfect, immaculate, cinematic moment.
Yeah.
He's like, I can't see anything. And she's like, get out of there. He's getting close to you. And then it's back to the screen of beep.
God.
Beep.
God.
It's amazing. You're going to love it.
And Halloween was another one. Because a lot of people misunderstood that. They misunderstood it then, and they kind of misunderstand it now. For better or worse, it gave birth to the whole splatter genre. Most of it wasn't very good, other than, I don't know, the first two Friday the 13th or whatever. But it's unfair to say that Halloween was a splatter film, because there was hardly any blood in it. Yeah. The only time you really saw any blood, did you guys ever see that?
I've seen it, yeah.
It's when he comes out of the house and he's got the blood on him, the knife and the
at the very, very beginning.
In the very, very beginning. Yeah. And all you do is you see it on him, and that's it. So the fact that is always being classified as a splatter film is inaccurate because Friday the 13th, there were splatter films long before that, like 10,000 Maniacs and, you know, all of these over-the-top mid-60s films. But as far as what coined the genre for its time was the Friday the 13th stuff, Jason. That was pure, bona fide. I mean, you had some guy getting an arrow pushed through his
Even the producers are very, like, unapologetic. Like, no, that's what we were doing.
Yeah. And Friday the 13th works. It really, really does. A lot of what came after that didn't. But Halloween was a very, very different type of film because it relied on tension. There's so much of that was tension.
Well, when he's just standing there, then she looks
all
away,
of
looks
that.
back, and he's gone.
Yeah, none of that had happened before. And these are things that look at how many decades have gone by since that movie came out, and they still milk certain formats for doing certain things from that. Of him standing there, and there's a clothesline with a sheet blowing, and then all of a sudden he's not, and the sheet is still blowing. And the other thing too, like Jaws, was the attention to music. Now, in Jaws, it let you know, beating, you knew that it was coming. And that was perfect to set you up for the strike. As opposed to having it just come out of nowhere.
What's the cage thing?
Yeah, you putting that in the water, cage goes in the water, sharks in the water, otter shark,
fair Spanish lady. Here's to swimming with bow-legged women.
But Halloween, the music was different because it didn't let you know that he was there. The music started when the tension started.
It struck when he struck.
And all you heard was beating, beat, bang, bang. And that, just those, like everybody remembers that ding, 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 ding,
but they
ding,
don't
ding.
remember.
Everybody remembers that, but the real tension was just that beating, bang, bang.
Well, that's one of the things with...
And that happened right when he showed up. So then you were just, okay, you're scared, all this chaos happens, and then to make it worse is that this is the music going.
The original Terminator, I think they really used music really, really well. Whenever he's going after people, like they definitely had like the original, like the main theme for Terminator is amazing, but just that like the tension building music is also so phenomenal because
it was so minimalistic.
Yes,
that I have to point out. Have you seen that since the Orlando shooting happened?
What?
The
Terminator?
first Terminator.
No.
Watch it again. The whole scene where Schwarzenegger walks in the nightclub trying to find Sarah Connor and he just starts lighting people up just gets a whole lot more real.
Oh, jeez.
It's really fucked up. Like,
I think I saw that recently.
It's a great movie.
I didn't make the connection, but
I was like, I did not.
It was very close to where I went to college, and like my buddy who owns a comic book store in Orlando talks about he made a post about that, and I rewatched the movie. I was like, oh god, this is spooky.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things I realized with you when you watch movies, and this is one of the things I like about you is you're able to take the movie and you're able to relate it to you in some way. Like I really do appreciate that. Like whenever I used to watch a lot of art stuff, I used to do that, and then I was like, show me some cool shit.
Well, sometimes you just need to see cool shit.
Yeah.
What was it?
But now that's me all the time now. Now I'm just like, life fucking sucks. Eat a dick.
It's a mix.
Just show me some cool shit.
There was Eric. Have you seen the latest Halloween film that came out last year?
No.
It's really good.
I wanted to.
It is pretty good.
It's really
I wanted
good.
to. I had heard a lot about it.
It's like a direct sequel to the original film.
And it's I think it's very well done.
It's great.
And I'm not a fan of the series just because I don't watch horror much. But from the first one, it's very well done.
And John Carpenter does the music.
I am such a big fan of horror, but I only want good horror, and I don't understand why people have such a hard time making it because it really should be a no-brainer. But what happens is that they don't take advantage of how easy it is to do it. And then spend all that time coming up with something which comes up to be a movie like Alien.
Well, as someone that doesn't watch horror, especially like a lot of the horror that's come out in past years,
There's very little of it that's good. Every now and then...
Have you seen A Quiet Place? I really enjoyed
I haven't seen a horror movie in a very, very long time unless I caught it on cable.
Okay. Like,
the last couple of horror movies that I saw on DVD that I borrowed from my brother. One of them was called Orphan, which was a very interesting film and very unique. And then I was finally like, okay, somebody finally did something different. That was pretty fucked up. And then there was another one called Mama.
I've heard of that one.
Which was creepy and strange about these two siblings that their father took them out to a family cabin. He blew his head off out there, and those kids lived out there until they were probably about 10 years old or 12. I don't know who found them, a hiker or somebody, but these were like wild animals.
Oh my God.
And this couple sort of took them under their wing, and all this strange stuff starts to happen. They find the girls, they overhear the girls talking with someone in their room, referring to it as Mama. And it just gets really, really fucking creepy.
That sounds creepy.
You know, it sounds like a good kind of creepy.
It does sound, yeah.
And there's a lot of strange scenes that can literally make your hair stand on end that really aren't doing much of anything. My favorite is this long shot of a hallway where there's a bedroom door and the door is open and there's a child standing there sideways in the room talking to someone that is not in the shot. And I'm trying to think. My mind is confusing it because they were so long. I don't know why I'm thinking of a ball, but I'm sure I'm probably relating to The Sixth Sense or one of those other types of films where there was a ball in it.
Or The Shining or something.
Or maybe, I'm trying to think, or maybe she had like a sheet or something. Oh, yeah, it was that. She had like a towel or something, and she said saying something like, let's play London Bridges or something. And she's got a towel, and she reaches out of the camera shot to hand it to who is she's talking to. And then she backs up and holds her end.
And something else is
and
holding.
Something else is on the other end holding that, but you don't see it.
Oh, wow.
And you're like, whoa!
That's wild.
And I love that. I have not seen that in
wild.
anything. A lot of what they keep milking is things like, if I see one more film where it's like, oh God, the bathroom and the medicine cabinet. All right, you're looking in there, there's no one there. You think all of a sudden you open the cabinet really fast and there's nothing in there. And then you go, and then you close the cabinet and there he is standing there. If I see that one more time in a film, I'm going to lose my bottle.
There's one that scared the absolute shit out of me as a kid. I think it was probably the first one I really saw. But it was in the Mothman Prophecies, and like that movie was creepy to me, and especially as a kid because it's just like, oh my God, this is based on something that supposedly actually happened. And of course, as a kid, I'm like, this is total fact. Every frame of this film is fact. And there's this part where Richard Gere is like, he's been investigating all this shit, and he does the thing. He opens the fucking cabinet, gets something in, closes it. And this, you don't even, like, this is the best part about it is they cut away immediately to a different scene. But it's like, the whole thing is you can't tell if it's in his head or if he's actually seeing this fucking Mothman creature. But he closes the thing, and there's just this shadowy, like, blob with these fire red eyes staring back at him. And it immediately cuts to the next day, and he's driving somewhere. And it was really, like disorienting. Because you would expect it to play out like that horror movie moment where it's like he's going to turn around, the thing's going to be like, or whatever the fuck. But no, it's just like, it's there, he shuts the thing, and then they cut away. And it fucked with me. Dang. And it's so weird because it's like I watched the movie again like within the past like 4 or 5 years, and it's still like, I think it's a really good movie, but that part still fucked with me because it's just like, even though the special effects are really cheesy and dated, it's still just like that, the fact that they cut away from it, they don't linger on it, it's like almost more frightening to me because it's like you don't know what happened. I'm trying to think of something else that'd be fun. Well, I think
comic books of the 70s.
I was gonna say, what comics did you read growing up?
Well, alright. I always thought that I was different than a lot of other cartoonists that whatever your influences are and where you started at this point A and where you were at point B or C. A lot of people that I knew from like my generation or older usually start out with certain things like, what they call funny animal books. Woody Woodpecker, even though he was animated, he was always had his own comic books and stuff. Casper the Friendly Ghost and Wendy the Witch and all those. A company called Harvey Toons put a lot of those things out.
Is that where Casper came from? I never knew that.
Yeah, Casper, Spooky, Hot Stuff. And then there was tons of these other weird books that fascinated me. Long story short, a lot of cartoonists or comic book people started out with that kind of shit. Even Mad Magazine, very early on. And then they graduated to sophisticated stuff like Marvel and DC and stuff.
Right.
I was the opposite. The first comic books that I ever got into were Marvel. But it's not
you went straight into the superhero stuff?
Straight into the superhero stuff. Now, what attracted me to drawing cartoons was not even comic books or Saturday morning cartoons, but the fact that my family were big newspaper readers. Oh. And in those days, you used to get a morning paper was published, and then you had an evening paper. And they subscribed to two local papers, the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald. Both of those arrived in the morning, both of those arrived in the evening around 5. I used to practice drawing, which is why I like mostly a lot of single panel, or what they call as gag cartoons, because the first people I really got into were not comic book people, but editorial cartoonists. That's how I learned to use these styles that they had. The first comic books that I got came close to that period of time, but a little bit longer. Straight into the superhero stuff. After a while, the superhero stuff started to get boring. What I felt that I was really interested in, see, even real early on, I liked stuff that was like, it felt otherworldly. I hate to use the term magical because it sounds too Peter Pan-esque, and I don't mean to make it sound that way, but what are you talking about? You people. I was trying to think of what that dialogue was for that airplane.
Lady, if you don't shut that kid up, I'm gonna fuck it. I need to play that for you.
Having a hard time over here.
Yeah, I don't mean to divert. Just John DiMaggio tells this joke, and the whole thing is it's like Paul Lynde, who was on Hollywood Squares, and he was a very famous TV personality in the 60s and 70s, right? He talked like this. And was he gay? Was he open?
Yeah, he was real flamboyant. Way over the top.
Well, real quick, I don't know if you know this, because Paul Lynde has been an inside joke of me and Eric's for a while. Did you notice this? I'll tell you about that later. But long story short, this whole thing is it's like Paul Lynde was a very big alcoholic and everything, so he's sitting hungover as shit on a plane sometime during the 60s. And there's this kid that just keeps running up and down the aisle, and he's just like, "Excuse me, stewardess, having a little bit of a hard time over here. Would you please quiet that child?" So she goes and quiets the child, talks to the mom, is like, "Please, you gotta quiet the child." So it happens again. He's like, "Stewardess, having a bit of a hard time over here. Would you please quiet that child?" So it happens again, and then by this point they've drawn the curtain, be separating first class, like that. Kid doesn't give a shit. Yeah. Kid starts running up, and finally, Paul Lynde turns around and rips the curtain away. He goes, "Shh, lady, if you don't shut that kid up, I'm gonna fuck it." Oh my god. And needless to say, the kid
Which
shut
wouldn't
up.
have flown nowadays.
Yeah,
no,
really,
jail.
I'm just picturing a hungover / drugged up Paul Lynde just looking. It looks like that. Well, it's that picture.
Yeah,
it's has some crazy coffee.
His eyes bugged out of his head.
Oh my god.
Alice.
Yeah.
But comics and
So superhero stuff started to get kind of boring for me relatively quickly. I mean, I wasn't really looking for much depth because I didn't really know of anything with depth. We used to buy comic books based on how much fighting was at the end, and that was our criteria.
Like flavor of the week kind of thing.
Yeah. So, like, right with all the superhero stuff was all this funny animal cartoons. One comic I had was just absolutely fucking weird. It was called Baby Snoots.
What the fuck?
And it was this baby elephant dressed up like a baby with a fucking diaper and some bonnet on his head. That kind of stuff started to percolate something in me, and I was just like, this stuff is just like really weird. Like, I can't quite get my mind around it.
Yeah.
So I kind of stopped with the superhero shit for a long while and started to get into this funny animal crap because it was just really weird, and it was all drawn in this Walt Disney-esque kind of perfect cartooning style.
Yeah.
And I got into that shit for a long while. And then somewhere, I actually got into Mad Magazine rather late. It was probably about, I don't know, 12 or 13, I think.
Did heavy metal for you come before or after that?
I'm glad you mentioned heavy metal, because heavy metal is very important to me. Heavy metal came before that. Before Mad Magazine. But it was, I had already been into those funny animal cartoons and the Marvel stuff.
No, it's heavy metal form of...
Yeah, it was a... Well,
it was a comic magazine first, right?
Not necessarily a comic. It was a magazine, but it was an illustrated magazine.
Okay.
It was science fiction oriented.
Oh, okay.
And the whole thing was artwork.
It's adult themed.
Yes. Now, it originally came from a French publication called Metal Hurlant, and it had, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Mobius,
no.
The French illustrator.
Uh-uh.
He
did that one comic that, Valerian, right?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I know most of his 70s stuff. Anything that he did after that, I'm a little vague on. But he was a big French illustrator, science fiction, fantasy-oriented stuff. He and a couple of other guys did stuff for this publication in France. There was an American version. I don't know the logistics or not. I don't know whether it was the same publishers or whatnot. But over here, they started something similar and called it heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
And then it started, I think the first issue was probably about, 75, I'm going to take a guess at. My uncle was a big comic book collector and science fiction fan, so he had tons of shit. So whenever he was not around, I'd sneak and get into his shit and look at stuff. So, all of a sudden, I'm really snooping. He had some weird futuristic-looking desk that looked like something out of the Jetsons or something. So, I slide this secret panel, and there's a row of magazines. What the hell's this? These don't look like comic books. It's like the size is all wrong.
It's like
There's
huge, right?
Big row of them. So I grab one and I pull it out and I look at the cover and it's heavy metal. But unlike comic books where it's all ink work and flat silk screen, these are paintings.
Oh, wow. In each page?
Each page.
What?
But all done by different artists. Some stories were 2 pages long. Some are 1 page.
It's like a kind of an anthology, right?
No, not really. I mean, they published quarterly, and it was just basically whatever artists that they were featuring in that issue were in there. Some had an ongoing strip that went on for years with that magazine. Some would just be periodical in there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I turned to this page, and it was the first thing that I saw was this page with this title of the character's name that said Den, D-E-N. And it was this, I had never seen artwork like this in my life. The first thing that stood out was the nudity. I mean, just full-blown nudity in a comic book type magazine was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. So that caught my attention. But this artwork was unreal. I had never seen anything like that. It was by a guy named Richard Corbin. And I instantly became a fan, and I had been a fan my whole life. The second thing that I noticed was how violent it was. Now, I was not a violent kid, but like any kid, you like violence in movies and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, oh shit, they're doing that, you know?
Yeah. The other thing that I noticed was the violence. There's this scene that was so immaculately choreographed of this character, Den, who is this naked bald guy fighting these other guys, and he's whirling around. The way he was drawn in all these karate positions was phenomenal. I mean, there was transparencies where you could see through the character and see his next position behind him. Years later, I finally figured out how he did it. It was airbrush. And so then the next panel of him whirling around is him throwing a karate kick, and there's this panel of this incredibly rendered foot with this beautiful reflection and purple shadow behind it, crushing this guy's jaw, and teeth are flying out of the guy's mouth. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? That was exactly my reaction. I'm like, what the fuck is this? So every time I got a chance, I'd sneak in and look through these heavy metal things.
Nice.
Now, the other thing that was in that cabinet, which was another important thing, was my first introduction for something called a fanzine. Now, here you had heavy metal, which was printed the size of a regular magazine, like a Time magazine. There was a whole row of all this other shit that was just Xerox paper, all stapled together. All the text was from a typewriter and badly Xerox drawings. Some of
very crude. Yeah.
Some of the artists I knew and recognized, like Walt Kelly's Pogo and John Buscema, who did Savage Sword of Conan stuff, and then a whole bunch of other people that I never had heard of before. But the one thing that stood out was the artist with a strange name, Von Bodie. He's the guy I always get compared to a lot, which I have no problem because I love him. So if you think my shit looks like him, then great. I'm honored. I never saw anything like this guy before, because this guy drew in the style of like funny animal cartoons, Walt Disney type stuff.
But it was adult.
It was adult. There were tits. There was people were yelling "fuck." I remember seeing some guy getting disintegrated by a ray gun.
Oh my God.
But yet it was drawn in this style that looked like it should have been in the funny papers.
Yeah.
That didn't make any sense. It was like my worlds colliding. That you take something real colorful and sweetly drawn, but then add this nastiness to it, and it becomes something else.
Is there a term for those type of comics?
He coined his own thing. He eventually, his great claim to fame was the fact that he was like the godfather of graffiti, because all these graffiti artists, when I first moved to Atlanta in '95, I started seeing all this graffiti everywhere where people were doing his characters all over the walls. I'm like, how do people know Von Bodie in '95? This was back in the '70s.
Yeah.
But everyone, for some reason, he inspired
heavy
graffiti
metal
artists, and they were out doing all that shit. But anyway, the fanzines with Von Bodie, and then heavy metal. But heavy metal blew my mind, and it did a lot of the same things for me that Monty Python did. Is that the guys in heavy metal, again, it didn't have to make any sense. Creatively, it has always been a big relief to me to know that when you start working on anything, it doesn't have to make sense.
Yeah.
Who says it has to make? Why does making sense mean that you've achieved something and somehow you failed if it doesn't make sense? Because here I'm looking at heavy metal and none of it makes fucking sense. Why is this bald guy fighting naked?
Yeah.
And why is that going on? Nobody explained any of that. There was no explanation for it.
Yeah.
None of these stories made sense. You know, you'd see one page immaculately illustrated. They show this asteroid burning through the atmosphere and it crashes in the desert. They show some astronaut guy walking away from the wreckage. He walks a few feet, he sees some plant on the ground, and then the plant explodes all these spores all over him, and that's the end of the story. That's it.
The movie does that too.
That was eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean that it's like, oh, okay, well, I could draw shit too.
Yeah.
You know,
It was just like you could do something open-ended like
because
that.
I didn't see things like that as he didn't bother. Like in music, there's, you've got people who think they're playing jazz because they're playing something that nobody else understands.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, John Coltrane was not honking through that. He was playing music.
Yeah.
Your lack of understanding makes you think that he's just going,
like just putting a blanket over.
yeah, but you doing that, you're not doing what John Coltrane's doing. Trust me. And it's the same thing with art stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, someone might look at it, we could get real technical about it, and you get some literary stiff that looks at it and says, what is this? I don't know who this astronaut is. Why is he there? What's this plant? You don't resolve anything. Well, whoever said it had to resolve in order for it to exist as something?
Yeah.
You're thinking about it too much.
Yeah.
I had to explain that to someone online a few weeks ago because I had done this parody of a Green Eggs and Ham cover. I don't even know if
with
that's
Ed
it.
Asner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine said, wow, you really had to reach for that one. I said, there was no reaching. I said, because there's really no pun.
Yeah.
The only reason that that's there is because it was the first absurd thing that popped into my head because I saw that ham with that Dr. Seuss fork sticking in it, and I thought, Ed Asner with a fork in his head. I wasn't trying to make Asner rhyme with eggs.
Right.
Yeah.
I just thought, what if it was Ed Asner?
Yeah.
You've done a couple
That's
like
the first thing
yeah.
that came into my mind, and he has no context to Dr. Seuss. It has no context of rhyming, and it has some guy nearly went berserk trying to analyze it, telling me how it didn't make
It's just
sense.
a drawing.
And I said, dude, you're thinking about it too much. I said, relax.
Well, and I think that's another problem that we do too much is people tend, especially the society, we try to find the deeper meaning in everything. And a lot of times there's not a deeper meaning.
Sometimes a
it's
cigar is only a cigar.
Yeah, it's like in high school English class where it's just like, oh, well, the reason that the drapes are blue is because it's some sort of undertone about depression. So like, maybe the drapes are just fucking blue because that's the first color you can make.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Now, I do like the deeper meaning of
yes,
things.
absolutely.
I love philosophy. But I love the antithesis of philosophy, of stillness, non-sound,
It doesn't always have to be
thinking.
philosophical.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be jammed with metaphors and connective tissue that relates to this, and you can find a world of something and just
enjoy it. Just enjoy it.
One of my favorite things was some Zen parable of a Zen master teaching his class, and everyone files in for the class, and there's quiet. And he's looking around, and outside you hear a bird chirp, and he says, "End of lesson, class dismissed." They came wanting something.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he showed them something that they didn't understand.
But in the end, it's all being present. We were here. We were still. The bird chirped. If you're looking for more out of that, I don't know what else to give you, because that's the lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's fascinating, that kind of shit.
Yeah,
I love this. So I guess in closing, I'm once again going to poke at you, and because you gotta do your Connery.
You do a pretty good Sean Connery too. If that
I don't know if I've heard your Sean Connery.
The prom queen.
It's like, oh yeah, it's a line from The Rock. He says to Nicolas Cage, because Nicolas Cage says, "I'll do my best." He's like, "You're abashed. Losers always worry about their best. Winners go home and fuck the prom queen." And just hearing James Bond say that's pretty amazing.
It's funny you're talking about Sean Connery, because when I did that Zardoz, I wanted his accent there. But see, the interesting thing is that you can say okay, this is a lot of the stuff that I love about what happens when you're in the immediacy of working on something. Because I try not to think about it for more than a couple of seconds or I've blown. All of this is about just being immediate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could polish it like a stone, and I would like to see you develop those characters a little bit. Whatever.
I want motivation. We, the people of the United States of America.
But that's a perfect example there is that when I did that Zardoz thing, I did his dialogue as Sean Connery. But yes is the only word that could transcribe visually.
Yeah.
How the hell was he going to say? What was the other word that I had in there?
I can't honestly.
What else? There was some.
Yeah.
He said something else, and then there was some. Oh yeah, there's the Ed Asner thing.
I love that you mimic the Seuss like art style very well there too.
Oh God, where was that?
I know I saw it.
Because I was.
Well, it's hard to miss Sean Connery in a Speedo.
Because it was a real point that I wanted to make about about how phonetically something works. There it is.
Now what you have to do is read it as Sean Connery.
Yeah, so he's like, say, these. So that works. Say and these, but schnazzy. He wouldn't say schnazzy. He'd say schnazzy.
Yeah.
But if I spelled shazzy or schnazzy, they wouldn't know that I meant snazzy, if anybody even knows what that word means.
Right.
So that was the one hang-up that I had with that, is that doesn't work phonetically with his accent, because he wouldn't have the sh only in the beginning.
Right.
Have it towards the
Snazzy is how he would do it.
Your mother's a whore, Trebek.
Yeah. It's like, say, he's a pretty snazzy. So, phonetically, it didn't work, that last part of it. So I found that to be fascinating when I did that. So I had no choice but to say schnazzy.
Well, I got to ask, when's Charlton Heston and Stink gonna come in?
There's nothing quite opening again. Stink.
Carbonated
stink.
Jeremiah, you can see it up there. That's where we came up with the stink thing at work.
Oh, okay.
So there's a
he's
part
sweating in the desert. He cracks it open. He's like, there's nothing quite like a nice kid stink.
Yeah, and that's where that one came in. What was it? There's
like, it almost smells like balls.
I did a part 2 to that where it's just like it's when I first got like a bunch of disgusting colors with my art markers, and I drew this glass and like colored it in.
It's glass.
Glass. But I drew this glass, and it's just like, it's like he ran a marathon and squeezed his drawers into a glass.
Oh, God.
And it's like this horrible like orange brown, and then there are these flies like dancing around. It's vile. There's 3 things you do that make me laugh every time I see them. One is when you do a character with their open mouth and their teeth. Particularly like when you've done like your demon and skeleton characters. But then there's like the hands, which your characters are so expressional with the hands. But then to add to the teeth, a lot of times they're sucking their shit coming out.
I do love that in art, where you have like a character just yelling and you just see spit everywhere. It's exaggerated emphasis on that. It's just...
And that's why
I can see a sound effect with
that.
That's
see, that's the beauty of Mad Magazine, because that was my reaction when I first experienced that for the first time. As a kid, I still am.
Do you ever really grow up? Yeah, that's what I thought.
I did for a period of time, and I lost myself, but then I found that again.
Yeah.
Was that the 10-year period?
That was the 10-year. I can't say I lost myself in that regard. I was very focused on music, and there was a lot of stuff that was happening with that was good for what that was. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what I did lose was a great aspect of an automatic sense of being youthful again, because the artwork has always been that way. There's really no way of saying this without saying pretentious, and I don't mean to be that way. The only way that I can do a 3rd grade sense of humor is to be a third grader. So I have to have the same enthusiasm for picking my nose and flicking it as a 55-year-old as I would have in the third grade.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like today I wrote on my Facebook page, it's just text, and it says, how the hell did I say it? I said, today I think I'm going to draw something with containing maturity and substance. Nah, fuck it.
It's honestly like those little things like popping up. It's just like, yes, keep going.
But, you know, and like I say, Sarah, you know, I've got haters that say this is infantile. I says, you're damn right it is. I says, I try to be that way.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that, and again, I don't mean to make this sound like dramatic, but of the years of doing commercial art, and when I was I was not satisfied. I was not satisfied in advertising. This was not what I wanted to do. I mean, I certainly didn't think that people were going to hand me money for doing what I wanted to do. But
erect a statue, Your Honor.
Erect a statue, Your Honor. A hero in your hometown.
You jumped dead.
When I came back to it 10 years later, I really, really did have a dialogue with myself because I did it at a time that I needed it. I was really at an emotional crossroads with a lot of stuff. Some shit in my life had ended. Things had not turned out in certain ways that I had hoped for, and I was in a real spiritual and emotional crisis. And I decided to go to Binders to apply for a job. So I go there, and I figured, okay, I no longer do this stuff, but I have a lifetime of knowledge. I still think I could. It's better than what I'm doing now. And so I went in, filled out an application, talked to David. They weren't hiring anybody. So I thought, okay, well, that doesn't really clear up my situation. So I thought to myself, you're in a real emotional bind here. What are you going to do? Because this ain't going to change anything. It was good that you came down and filled out an application, but it hasn't changed anything.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, I'll buy a few art supplies. I says, it kept me alive all these years. Might as well try it again. So I bought a sketchbook and a couple of pens, and then I went home. But before I started, I had a quick dialogue with myself, and I said to myself, don't have any high expectations of this. You may do one drawing, you may draw for 2 minutes and say, I'm not feeling any of this, and then you're back to where you were. Just do it. Normally I always drew. I like to have music playing. Music was always a big part of what I was doing regardless. I didn't have any drafting table at the time. I didn't have any of that stuff. So I sat on the arm of my sofa, and I didn't put anything on. No TV, no nothing. Just quiet. And I did this weird, trippy drawing, and it felt awkward physically, but I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved the awkwardness because the awkwardness felt new. Then later that night, I did something else. And then I could hardly wait to get back to it. And next thing you know, it just picked up steam, and it just kept going and going and going and going and going. And then gradually I came back, and it's been 10 years. And during that 10 years, I've gone in and out of different sort of styles and concepts and things that I was doing. But I made sure that I was on the right page with myself of what I was expecting myself. Because I say, okay, now what are you going to... When was there a period of time when you were truly at your happiest with this shit? And I said, when I was about 9 years old, when I was a kid, because I didn't have a concept of earning a living with it. I didn't need people to validate something. I didn't need situations to validate anything. I did it because I liked it. Okay, that's my template. I do it because I like it. If someone wants to buy something, great. But in terms of getting back to that, accepting commissions and all that other stuff, I can't do that anymore. I can't be the one that takes your ideas and gives it a visual. I can't go there. And that's kind of a tough thing to do because people say, "All right, you're too busy with that important stuff like the toilet drawings."
It is important, damn it.
It's important. It's important to me.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right. I am busy with toilet drawing. So, you you come around to a full circle of things. Being in your 50s is fascinating. It really, really is, because a lot of what was really important to me when I was in my 20s, a lot of that stuff has changed. And I certainly don't mean becoming apathetic about things, or, that's if you're constantly keeping your foot in your life and you're awake to your life and you're constantly listening to yourself, you're constantly learning from yourself, stretching yourself to learn new things, it becomes a whole other different thing, and your priorities are different when it comes to things, and all that manifests in there with your art. Yeah. And I realize that when I'm working on these, it takes a lot of leaving ego at the door when I work on this.
You just gotta dive in.
Because I say that in order for me to get what I'm after, I have to do stuff like I'm always doing quick sketches, which is essentially all these really are, quick sketches. Because that's where I'm getting what I want. Where you learn to leave ego aside is that you're no longer trying to prove to anybody what kind of a hot shot you think you are. I don't have it in me to sit down and try to do something like Frank Miller to prove to people I know how to do stuff like that, or I can imitate so-and-so and prove that I can do that, or I can render something in graphite that looks like a photograph. I've already been there and I've done that. I don't want to keep doing that my whole life. I want to draw the stuff I haven't seen yet, that I haven't done yet. So the leaving the ego at the door is to mean that you're serving some higher other part of your creativity, that you're going for something more than just sheer technique.
It's the idea rather than the technique.
Yeah, and like John Cassavetes, I'm not trying to ever compare and say I'm like a cartoon version of John Cassavetes, but I get that concept. I get the concept of the same with Warhol. We live in a very slick age. You look at a graphic novel and it's impeccably done. I don't want to be the millionth guy doing that. Yeah. I want jagged lines. You know what I mean? Yeah. One time some guy said, "Your stuff looks like reminds me if I did a drawing with my left hand and was hung over." And I said, "Good, you understood what I did." I would have said, "Looked like I drew with my ass," but you wanted to say your left hand. But the more that technology gets more perfect, the more crude I want my drawings to be.
Because you want to get farther away from it.
There's no point in doing that. It was the same thing here in Atlanta when I had bands. A lot of what I did musically, I'm a percussionist. I played a lot of Arabic music, a lot of North African music, Turkish, Mediterranean, Greek, the whole 9 yards. When other people started getting into certain things, then I went into the next direction. Yeah. When everybody was doing this, I did Greek music. When everybody started doing Greek music, I went and did this. It's the same thing with this stuff. The more everybody is displaying chops where it's like it's just so overdone with the technique, I don't want to be the millionth guy doing that.
Yeah. Sure, yeah.
And it's the same thing with somebody said to me one time, he's like, "You sure got a lot of penises in your work." That's because no one's drawing them. Yeah. I says, "You show me anywhere on Facebook." I said, I've already drawn my share of tits. I said, you know what I mean? I said, "No one's drawn a dick." Yeah, I'll draw it. I'm secure enough of my masculinity. I'm not bothered by that.
It's a fucking dick, bro.
And that's what's up.
And it's the same thing with subject matter. It's the same thing with subject matter. I don't want to be the millionth guy that's, I'm not going to try to be clever. What's his face? Spiegelman already did Mouse. You know what I mean? We already had fucking Watchmen series. You're
not trying to reinvent the wheel.
I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. So I'm not saying that I scour the internet and say, "Oh, nobody did this, so therefore I'm going to do that." It just happens to be where I'm going with it. But it's like, I also like making people feel uncomfortable about stuff. Yeah. And a lot of what I do in here is I go the opposite. It's like what most people say is the freak. the freak is the one who's the most comfortable with himself. It's everybody else that's got the problem.
Yeah.
Big fat.
So I like to push shit with a cartoon.
Yeah.
It's like if you feel uncomfortable because you're looking at Princess Leia with a schlong the size of an elephant, then maybe you need to examine why you feel uncomfortable about that.
Yeah.
It's because to me, I laugh my ass off.
Yeah. It's hilarious.
You're uncomfortable. Maybe you need to examine that.
I'll never forget the one where you have it's like Darth Vader shitting into an R2 unit.
Yeah.
It's like R2 bucket. I found that on his Facebook when he first added me, and I could not. We were at work, and I couldn't stop laughing.
I'm going to be going through your Instagram for days.
Dude, it's amazing. Eric, where can our listeners find you?
You can find me at Instagram. I think that's just Eric N. Peterson, and then
I'll put a link in the show
and
notes.
then Facebook. If you just type in Eric Newman Peterson, Newman, my thing will pop up there. So you can find me on Facebook and that. I tend to be more active on Facebook because more energy seems to generate there.
I gotcha. Do you have any projects coming up you want to plug or anything like that?
I've always got stuff going on. It's just a matter of whether I end up getting it into completion. But as far as art stuff goes, all of this stuff that I do here, that these quick sketches on scraps, is going to be my coffee table book that I've been.
Hell yes! Hell yes!
That's awesome.
But but here's the thing, and I'll make this brief because I know we're wrapping up. For years, I've talked about a coffee table book. A lot of people I know are saying, you talked for years about the coffee table book. Where is it? Blah, blah, blah. Something never set right with me because I don't want to take old shit, which is what I was originally going to do. Mm-hmm. I don't need to have a retrospective of things. Here's what I did when I was 12. Here's what I did when I was 40.
Yeah.
Through the years.
Yeah. So scratch all that.
Yeah.
The whole point of this is about spontaneity. Mm-hmm. I do these throughout the day. I draw these at my break at work. I draw these before I go to work. Mm-hmm. You know, my pockets are full of paper. That's what I want the book to look like, to manifest what is it that I'm doing now. These are just loose drawings on scraps. So it's going to be about that. In fact, I even thought of calling the book Scraps.
Do it.
And that's what it's going to be. But the thing lately that I feel really thrilled about, and I thank my wife for this, and my mother-in-law, because they've been encouraging me for a long time, is I started studying with a guy for doing voiceover. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I said that earlier or not. Yeah. So I'm real excited about that. I had my first one-on-one class with him last Monday. I have my second class with him tomorrow, and I couldn't believe how quickly it accelerated. I mean, we recorded a couple of spots where I got to do two extremes. Mm-hmm. One, I just went completely over the top of that, and then the other one was some United Postal Service Christmas message. He wanted to go the whole other opposite direction, so I'm like, what do you think of when you think of holidays? We think of cinnamon, spice, snow, that kind of... I've never done that. My throat was hurting from that. The one where I was screaming like a maniac, my throat was fine. But the challenge was, what do you think of with the holidays this year? That hurt my throat. But anyway, long story short, that's my latest project, which is that, because he's got me mapped out for the next month, and hopefully by a month from now, I'll have already have my equipment set up.
Hell yeah.
And he showed me all this shit and where to find all this stuff for jobs. So it's great. Long story short, my end goal with it is that I really, really hope to be doing voiceover for Adult Swim and Cartoon Network.
Hell yeah.
So I'm hoping to get stuff where I can get in the door with that. But I'm not going to knock it if I end up doing a toothpaste commercial on some Arkansas radio.
Yeah.
Money's money is money, and I'll do it.
And you're doing
anyway.
voiceover. That's what
I'm
we're
doing voiceover because I like to do stuff like that.
Nice.
We'll definitely we'll have you on again at some point. Hopefully by that point.
This is fun.
Yeah.
There's
there's so much more to unpack.
I was going to say,
we didn't get
I feel like we
to.
didn't touch on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's, oh my gosh, it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, all what y'all were talking about, the Rambo thing, was just really, really great because there's a lot. I mean, if we go and pick through what y'all were getting into with all that, we could really connect that Rambo
I was going to say, let's do that.
Let's
bring it back.
Seriously, go back to the Rambo thing at some other point because there's a lot of connectiveness in there.
Okay.
The whole thing of wanting something for this guy that didn't happen.
Yeah.
this that didn't happen.
But then the reality.
But the reality.
Yeah.
You guys hit on a lot of great shit that I'm telling you could really go back and mine that for something.
Nice.
Hell yeah. I mean,
Nice.
hell yeah. What we'll do is, like you said, like when you've seen it, we'll come together and we'll reconvene. And I just want to add that this is our first episode for October. And I can't find a more fitting thing. Also, something I want to throw in, his employee number at work is 666.
Oh, nice.
And that was random, right?
No, I deliberately.
Okay.
I deliberately picked that.
Nice.
There's, obviously I'm not a Satanist. But the thing is that,
are you, Captain?
but I enjoy antagonizing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I like better a lot of times than sending someone out of there with a receipt. and over the years, I've had a lot of wonderful reactions, not in a good way, where, so I hand the receipt back and a nice family is standing there, and the wife's like, and then points to it, and the husband leans in and looks, and they look at me. But the funniest thing was, some guy, I rang him out, and he looked at it, and he says, did they randomly give you that number, or did you pick that number? And I just laughed. and he sounded just like Kramer. He went, "You're anointed." Oh my God. And then he left.
I think that's the perfect way to close this. Thank you for joining us. This has been Comic
Thanks, fellas.
Thank you for joining us, Eric. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we can't wait to have you back.
I had a good time. Thank you, guys.
The following audio presentation is property of Lake House Creative, LLC. Any reference to copyrighted works is for review and commentary purposes only.